So, welcome everyone to meeting number 28 of the House of Commons Standing Committee on Health. We're meeting pursuant to the order of reference of May 26, 2020. The committee is resuming its briefing on the Canadian response to the outbreak of the coronavirus. To ensure an orderly meeting, I would like to outline a few rules to follow. Interpretation in this video conference will work very much like in a regular committee meeting. You have the choice at the bottom of your screen of either floor, English, or French. As you are speaking, if you plan to alternate from one language to the other, you will need also to switch the interpretation channel so that it aligns with the language you are speaking. You may also want to allow for a short pause when switching languages. Before speaking, please wait until I recognize you by name, except during questioning when the questioner can direct to whom he or she wants the question to go. When you are ready to speak, you can click on the microphone icon to activate your mic. I remind everyone that all comments by members and witnesses should be addressed through the chair. And when you're not speaking, your mic should be on mute. So I would like now to welcome our first panel of witnesses. We have from the Agricultural Union, we have Fabian Murphy, National President. From the Canadian Federation of Agriculture, we have Mary Robinson, President. And from Canning Sauce Company, we have Kim Hatcher, a farmer. So we will start with the Agricultural Union. You have 10 minutes for an opening statement. Please go ahead, 10 minutes.
Okay, so my voice is okay? Everybody can hear me?
It works for me.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and members of the committee. It's my pleasure to be here today. Approximately 2,500 food inspectors, including 1,500 frontline meat inspectors, are among those who are members of the Agriculture Union. Their job is to make sure Canadians have safe food. This is a rain or shine kind of job. They are dedicated people who cannot do their jobs from home. They have to show up despite the risks, and they do every day. We call them invisible heroes because they are hidden from view most of the time, yet the work they do is essential. We owe them a great deal. Reports from inspectors in the field show a wide range of in how CFIA handled the pandemic and protected its staff region to region. In Alberta, I have received reports that CFIA was late to protect inspectors. It is only in the last few weeks that inspectors in northern Alberta received one package of 50 disposable masks each, at best a 3-week supply. Before CFIA supplied its staff in northern Alberta with face shields at the end of April, some inspectors on the morning and afternoon shifts had to share shields supplied by the establishment. At the beginning of the outbreak, they went to work every day with just their normal gear, a smock, hard hat, and a hairnet. There were no gloves, face masks, or shields. There were still no latex gloves, and there were still no N95 masks. In southern Alberta, CFIA's initial approach was to try and assure inspectors there were no risks associated with working at the Cargill plant, site of the largest single outbreak in the country. The situation in Quebec seems to be the total opposite. CFIA has worked closely with us and public health officials to make sure inspectors and veterinarians are safe at work. The point I want to make here is that there is no consistent national approach by CFIA to deal with outbreaks, and it shows in other ways I will address momentarily. Physical distancing in most of the meat production plants in Canada is in many cases impossible. I believe proper hazard assessments will determine that the protections provided leave employees vulnerable to this biological hazard, COVID-19, but these assessments have not been done. In fact, conditions in these plants are perfect environments for the virus to grow and persistently lurk. They are cool and humidity levels are high. On top of that, they are extremely noisy environments, so workers must get close to each other to be heard over the constant mechanical noise. It is no wonder meatpacking plants have produced amongst the highest concentration of infections during the first wave of the pandemic, higher even than nursing homes in some provinces. As mentioned, the largest single outbreak took place at the Cargill meat packing plant in High River, Alberta. Half of the 2,000 employees working there were infected, including half of the inspectors assigned to that plant. The health and safety provisions of the Canada Labour Code have not been followed in these plants. As a consequence, the CFIA continues to follow practices that could actually help the spread of the virus. For example, Processed meat inspectors continue to be assigned to multiple facilities. Like long-term care workers did when they worked at multiple facilities, inspectors going from plant to plant could actually become vectors spreading the virus. The Canada Labour Code requires employers to appoint a qualified person to conduct hazard analysis when there are new threats in the workplace and to implement plans to mitigate hazards and protect the health and well-being of the workers. The Canadian Food Inspection Agency, which is responsible for regulating food producing establishments that are federally licensed, has taken.
Pardon me, Mr. Murphy.
Yes.
Could you lower your mic a little bit? There are some plosive sounds coming through, the popping.
Okay. Is this any
Thank
better?
you. Try
Okay.
that.
So the Canadian Food the Canadian Food Agency, which is responsible for regulating food producing establishments that are federally licensed, has taken a hands-off approach, ensuring the safety of its employees. Despite the early stages of the outbreak, most inspectors had no access to any protective gear, and employees were actually forbidden to wear their own face coverings. Basic precautionary practice, such as making alcohol-based hand sanitizers available to inspectors, were not followed. CFIA deferred to the meat plants to provide protective equipment to CFIA staff. Inspectors working in plants where the company did not provide its own employees personal protective equipment went without. When COVID-19 outbreaks occur, as they have on the routine basis in these facilities, there is no consistent approach to addressing the threat to public health and worker safety. CFI has left these decisions in the hands of the individual provincial public health agencies. For example, an outbreak at the Olymel pork production plant in Montreal area was met with a 2-week shutdown of the facility to allow deep cleaning and workers the opportunity to isolate. Only those free of the virus were allowed to resume work when the plant reopened. On the other hand, the Giant XL beef plant in Brooks, Alberta, never shut down when an outbreak occurred, not even for a day. As a result, fully half of the residents of the town of Brooks became infected. All Canadians, food production workers, and inspectors should be protected by the best public health and the workplace safety practices, no matter where they live. The federal government has announced a $77 million fund to support workers' safety improvements in meatpacking plants. No criteria for how this fund will be distributed has been announced, and it seems unlikely that any of this money will actually be available until the end of September. In our opinion, Canadians will get the biggest bang for their investment of this money if companies are eligible to receive support only if they collaborate with the unions representing workers at their plants. This will ensure the money is wisely spent to achieve the safety objectives of the program. Around the world, we are seeing the second wave of the virus hit countries that have relaxed their COVID lockdowns. I sincerely hope Canada is spared such a fate, but hoping is not good enough. We need a plan of how to avoid a repeat of our food production facilities becoming virus hotspots. We recommend a national approach when outbreaks occur in food processing establishments. The implementation of Parts 10 and Part 19 of the Canadian Occupational Health and Safety Regulations in all facilities to mitigate these risks. Require companies as a condition to receive any support from the Emergency Processing Fund to work cooperatively with the unions representing workers. Keep production line speeds slower than normal to permit physical distancing. Stop multi-plant assignments for inspectors. Make routine testing for the virus available to inspectors. Last but not least, the dedication and bravery of CFIA inspectors who risk their health and well-being every day they go to work must be recognized by ensuring they have adequate personal protective equipment, including latex gloves, N95 masks, face shields, and access to a steady supply of hand sanitizers. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you, Mr. Murphy. We go now to the Canadian Federation of Agriculture. Ms. Robinson, please go ahead, 10 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and committee members, for the opportunity to speak to you today. My name is Mary Robinson. I'm part of the 6th generation of my family to farm in Prince Edward Island, and I'm also the president of the Canadian Federation of Agriculture. Our federation represents roughly 200,000 Canadian farm families and has been in existence since 1935. To start, I want to thank and acknowledge the work of Canadian governments and at all levels. Public servants and elected officials have been working 24/7 to help Canadians and keep us safe during these difficult times. These coming weeks and months are critical if we are to ensure Canada's domestic food supply is secure both now and into the future. The federal government has designed and executed many programs for business and Canadian individuals. We are talking today about how we can bring this ingenuity and commitment to support our farmers and food businesses in their continued commitment to providing an adequate and affordable Canadian food supply. We believe the resilience, adequacy, and affordability of Canada's food supply is a critical public health objective for all Canadians, second only to the direct healthcare response to COVID-19 itself. The COVID-19 crisis continues to generate significant challenges and uncertainty throughout the agri-food sector, with potentially devastating impacts on farmers from coast to coast. As leaders, we have an obligation to plan for the worst and drive for the best. To understand the impacts of COVID-19, CFA, through a survey of members and other national commodity associations, identified $2.6 billion in projected short-term financial losses across the Canadian agri-food sector nearly 2 months ago. To date, the government has announced a number of initiatives for the sector, including a series of measures intending to increase credit availability for the sector, alongside the May 5th announcement of $252 million in assistance, while committing to further funding announcements in support of the sector. While critically important to the sector, the funding relief to date falls well short of the sector's overall need, as there are a number of outstanding issues facing Canadian farmers. Today, I will speak to these outstanding issues, shortfalls in programming, and what's needed to ensure we don't see any unnecessary loss of food production during this crisis, which continues to place unprecedented stress on food supply chains around the world. For the first time in generations, serious questions in Canada have been raised about food supply chains and our food security. Canadian farmers continue to make daily decisions with regard to their businesses and the production of Canadian agriculture products while confronting both the immediate and longer-term challenges COVID-19 has introduced to the sector. These include the continued threat of processing disruptions, reducing supply chain capacity, and increasing costs due to production backlogs, the temporary loss of the food service industry and its long road to recovery, which has seen a key market for many agricultural producers lost in large part for the foreseeable future. Unfilled job vacancies throughout the agri-food supply chain, further challenged by the possibility of COVID occurrences in the workforce. Unprecedented market volatility, rising costs in both the farm and food processing industries as these essential businesses continue to put in place a number of COVID-related measures, and closure of sector-specific markets that can have devastating implications for subsectors of Canadian agriculture. The CFA has proposed a number of specific policy measures to help address challenges faced by the sector during COVID-19. A brief will be submitted to the clerk shortly with a detailed breakdown of these measures. Given the short time I have today, I would like to focus on 3 key areas. First, the need for enhanced business risk management coverage to ensure producers have support to overcome supply chain disruptions, address rising costs, and ultimately manage pressures to scale back production. CFA believes changes to BRM programs are the most efficient, comprehensive, and targeted means of assisting producers with both the immediate and longer-term challenges posed by COVID-19, in addition to the range of broad-spectrum challenges already confronting the sector, such as closures of key international markets, increasing weather-related risks due to climate change, and an overall rise in the capital requirements and costs involved in agricultural production. Had BRM programs been operating effectively, the CFA's view is that the program would have responded to up to 75% of the $2.6 billion in projected short-term financial losses referenced earlier. However, in the absence of these improvements, we continue to see a lack of trust among producers as to the ability of these programs to respond to the challenges they're experiencing, resulting in low program enrollment and a myriad of requests for ad hoc support. Through years of research, most of the solutions to fix the BRM suite are already known. Now it is a matter of the Government of Canada sitting down with their provincial counterparts and committing to a concrete timeline to fix these programs in concert with key stakeholders. In the absence of those timely reforms, Canadian farmers need urgent clarity on how government plans on responding to rising costs associated with producing food, uncertain access to labor, and loss of critical markets for many agricultural products. Second, in addition to the challenges directly confronting primary agriculture, there's a continued need to provide further support for food processors to mitigate the likelihood of COVID-related supply chain disruptions across the sector. While we were pleased to see the announcement of $77 million for food processors, our supply chain partners have indicated this is inadequate, with significant food and financial losses expected to follow any future disruptions. Industry assessments of the additional costs confronting food processors greatly exceeds the funding made available to date, with businesses continuing to take on sizable investments and changes to solutions that are so vital to so many supply chains may lose out if demand, as currently expected, greatly exceeds the existing funding support available. CFA is calling for urgent additional financial support to assist these businesses in retrofitting facilities to maintain capacity and support workplace safety. Third, where disruptions either have or will take place, CFA is calling for the timely introduction of additional funding beyond the $50 million food surplus program to ensure there is logistical support to address existing and anticipated surpluses. This support must be coupled with an immediate Buy Canadian campaign to prevent farmers from further scaling back production due to loss of the food services industry by highlighting the wealth and diversity of Canadian food products available through retail channels. Such a campaign would not only help respond to the loss of vital food service markets for many farmers and food businesses, but would play a vital role in educating Canadians about how food gets to their plates at a time where Canadians are already paying more attention to their food supply. This would also provide an important platform to support the promotion of greater food literacy at a time where Canadians are cooking more at home and the affordability of food is a growing concern. We believe these measures and those in our forthcoming brief work hand in hand to help maintain capacity and ensure Canada's agri-food sector is doing everything it can to put the food on the plates of Canadians and consumers around the world during these difficult times. Canadian farmers take pride in the fact that every day we feed Canadians. Like most sectors of the Canadian economy, farmers have felt the tremendous pain brought about by the unprecedented COVID-19 crisis. We will always work as partners with government to make nutritious and affordable food to all Canadians. I thank you for your time.
Thank you, Ms. Robinson. We go now to the Canning Sauce Company. Ms. Hatcher, please go ahead, 10 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Good afternoon. And as the least pedigreed witness on this panel, I thank you for the opportunity to address the committee. My name is Kim Hatcher, and I live in Canning, Nova Scotia, which is located in the Annapolis Valley and is the main agricultural sector of our province. My husband, Steve, and I own Canning Sauce Company, which produces hot sauces, barbecue sauce, and pasta sauces. We grow the majority of our ingredients that we use, and those that we don't are sourced from other local farms, as the sauces that we make use 100% local Nova Scotia grown products. We also have recently expanded and have obtained registered farm status, operating as Coy Wolf Farms, from which we grow and sell primarily greens, also a few select heirloom vegetables. Our farm expansion plans were already underway shortly before COVID-19 hit, and with a few alterations and a shuffling of priorities, we've been fortunate enough to be able to follow through with our desire to grow local food to provide to our surrounding communities. How the virus will affect our ability to secure funding assistance to install greenhouses for year-round greens production still remains to be seen. Overall, the impact that COVID-19 has had on our business and new farm has mostly been neutral or positive. Our sales have remained decent, with a few pantry items seeing a massive increase in popularity. We've also benefited greatly from the forethought of our local Wolfville Farmers Market that's managed by Kelly Radcliffe, as this market has had online sales available since 2017. The online platform WFM2Go has a separate manager in Lindsay Cloyce, and she reports that these sales have gone from 50 to 60 regular customers to well over 500 weekly orders since our pre-COVID days. This increase has required the addition of a second weekly delivery date, and those sales show no signs of slowing down. People want to buy fresh local food. We as a country just need to stop making it so cheap and easy to choose not to. While I feel like Nova Scotia in general has always put a fairly high value on local food and food products, the pandemic, I believe, has highlighted the problems in our food system throughout Canada and has forced people to really consider where their food comes from, how it's grown, and how it physically makes its way to you. Small and medium farms, regardless of the commodity produced, have largely struggled. This is in part by our products being undervalued or prices being undercut by mega-scale products that are cheaper but unsustainable in both practice and quality and stewardship of our agricultural lands. I believe that this pandemic is providing us with a very unique opportunity to fix our broken food system and to capitalize on the momentum surrounding small and medium-sized locally based food producers. We have a chance to strengthen local food producers, which in turn strengthens the communities that they're based in. It's a health and economic win-win scenario for communities all over Canada. Creating programs that reward buying locally, like the ingredients found in the cafeteria of your local hospital, or locally sourced offerings from a school lunch program, will be instrumental. Jenny Osborne, locally, and a team of dedicated people have started such a lunch program. Pre-COVID, there were 4 Annapolis Valley schools on board, as well as 1 on the South Shore. With a government subsidy to make school lunches affordable, and even with only 80% participation of the roughly 123,000 kids in the province at $1 a day, that's $100,000 worth of local food purchased per day. While I feel more funding is necessary for small scale and market-sized businesses, more importantly, I see this as a massive opportunity to reevaluate the importance that farms, particularly those using sustainable farming practices, have in our society, and creating programs that will give real life incentives to farmers, enabling them to provide their products in a long-term and sustainable way. 6 minutes from my home is Taproot Farms. It's a family-run, medium-sized certified organic farm that's been running a CSA, or Community Supported Agriculture program, for more than a decade. Since March, they've seen a 30% increase in membership and online sales. Again, I believe that Canadians want to buy local food, particularly when we make it the better option and support its growth, rather than the cheap and easy imported option that does nothing to serve our Canadian farming communities or our Canadian consumers. Unfortunately, they, like many other farms in our area, are struggling. While grateful for the increase in sales and awareness, the loss of such a large portion of our province's foreign workforce makes it an uncertainty as to whether this COVID-inspired increase in demand can even be met. The emergency relief benefit that I was eligible for, once recipients could still be earning some small portion of income of their previous income, will of course end. My husband, besides working our farm, also works full-time at another local farm, and it's one of the many that are sorely understaffed due to the cut in foreign workers. Based on our expansion plans, he will need to stop that outside work once we are in full greens production. I have thus far been unable to find a current program to assist us in bridging the gap created by fewer of our expected venues to sell our products, as we are too small or too new, or are voluntarily leaving a position in order to allow us the labor time needed to grow and sell local food in a volume that's financially sustainable for us. This is a terrifying position to be in, but one that's necessary. And I'm hopeful that more funding for market-sized businesses will become available. While there may be very few positives that come out of a global pandemic, I hope that support for a local and sustainable food system will be one of them. In closing, I'd like to state that given the enormity of the pandemic and the speed at which these programs and funding opportunities are needing to be released, I'm very pleased with our government's response. I also greatly appreciate the daily briefings that have been clear, calm, and concise, and relate to the general public without unnecessary sensationalism or dramatics. And with that in mind, I would also like to note something that may become a missed opportunity, but is a much needed confirmation of our current political landscape. My local MP is Cody Blois, Kings Hants. He is part of the Liberal Party of Canada. I happen to be a supporter of that party, and therefore I'm in the very fortunate position of feeling like I have a voice in Parliament and that my concerns are being appropriately represented. There are many Canadians who have an MP that does not belong to their party of choice and therefore do not feel like they have a voice in Parliament. Since April, I cannot stop imagining a PSA of all political leaders, Zoom clips of leaders talking to each other individually in a candid and casual fashion, not pandering, but complimentary. Like, I saw that tweet yesterday, that's great, or I can't agree with that initiative as it is. Okay, let's work on it. The political climate south of the border is divisive to the point of being malicious, and that fear and uncertainty is making its way here. I think that we would be missing an opportunity to show our country that we are a unified force against a global threat and to show the world that we are an example of how this can be done. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you, Ms. Hatcher. So we'll start our questioning now. We will do 2 rounds. We will start with Dr. Kitchen. Dr. Kitchen, please go ahead. You have 6 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you everybody for being here. I'm sure you would all agree that once a farmer and/or a rancher, always a farmer and/or a rancher. It's part of your system and it's part of your life, and we need more and more Canadians to take up that aspect of things. Now, I'm in Saskatchewan, and so, you know, ultimately we see a lot. I have a lot of that agriculture aspect in my area. Farmers, to help farmers deal with the effects of COVID-19, the industry actually, they requested that the Minister of Agriculture waive the carbon tax fee with respect to grain drying costs after what was dubbed the harvest from hell for the poor, due to the poor weather and excess moisture out here. We learned last week that the minister will not allow any exemption, and she also stated that at most farmers were paying $819 per farm to dry their grain, even though APAS provided data that showed otherwise. I personally know this to be untrue, as I've had many of my constituents who've come to me and shown me or written to me and shown me the exorbitant drying costs that some have been paying around, and some over $10,000 just to have their produce ready for sale. So Ms. Robinson, I'm wondering, have you or your organization heard from farmers regarding these types of cost compounding the issues that they already are faced with the COVID-19?
Thank you for the question, Dr. Kitchen. We have certainly heard it, and we, CFA, supports an exemption for agriculture because some of these activities that are being subject to the carbon tax, the timing is quite unfortunate for sure, but I think even above and beyond that, these are not non-essential activities. Drying grain after harvest is just a necessary activity in order to make sure that grain, the good of it, gets to go to market. So yes, we are aware of this, and it is a concern.
Would you agree that that a maximum expense of roughly $820 per farm is realistic for our producers in Canada?
Personally, I can't speak to that. I know I have seen some of the information that APAS has done. They've done an evaluation, the producers in Saskatchewan, and I think those numbers have been published. And I think generally the numbers are different than the minister has suggested.
Thank you. Mr. Murphy, you talked a little bit about CFIA and you know, the federal government organizations such as the CFIA rely on information provided by the Public Health Agency of Canada to make their decisions with respect to COVID-19 measures. We have heard from many witnesses at this committee that there are huge gaps and contradictions in the data obtained from the Public Health Agency. One example is just to show you is the Chief Public Health Officer, Dr. Tam, initially said that the wearing of masks would do nothing to stop the spread of COVID, yet she is now encouraging all Canadians to wear masks when out in public. I'm wondering, do you know of any producers who have experienced difficulty or confusion in determining what measures they need to take with their operations, other than the ones that you've mentioned, or even expand on the ones that you've talked about with the Cargill, et cetera?
Thank you, through you, Mr. Chair, to answer the question. I'm sure that the producers found this extremely frustrating and extremely confusing, as we were, as the union representing the food inspectors, were extremely frustrated with this process. I actually sit as co-chair of what's called the Service-Wide Health and Safety Committee, and that's a health and safety committee for all of government. And and I also sat at a national joint council where the Public Health Agency presented to that council, where I asked questions regarding these measures with regards to the non-medical masks, and in the beginning why the medical masks weren't available, weren't being recommended, and even after they were, it was clear that those medical masks were not considered personal protective equipment. So to answer your question, yes, I think it was a lot of confusion out there. Our main concern from the beginning of this is that the Public Health Agency is providing guidance for public health, not for an industrialized environment or a workplace where you have a hazard such as COVID-19, which is newly introduced. It's the employer's responsibility to conduct a hazard assessment based on the workplace and to implement measures that are going to protect the workers. They cannot defer to an agency such as the Public Health Agency, and I think this is where the government as a whole failed, and many departments failed to do that.
Thank you. The government has promised, and I heard a couple of you talk about the lack of workers, and the government has promised to create 700 agriculture jobs for students through the YES program, but it appears that funding was not approved as part of the estimates released this month. Have you heard from any farmers as to whether they have not been able to hire students through this program, or have been able to?
Is that question for me?
Actually, for Ms. Robinson and for Ms. Murphy, go ahead first. And
so I can't speak on behalf of the farmers, but I know that CFIA did hire some students, and so it's that would be under a different program. I think the Federal Student Workers.
That was more from the summer student program, correct?
Yes, correct.
Okay.
Yes.
Ms. Robinson, I'm really looking more at the YES program.
I can't speak specifically to the YES program. I know here in my province we've got a great program that's been offered by our provincial government that I think has been well accessed by primary producers.
Thank you, Dr. Kitchen. We go now to Mr. Blois. Mr. Blois, please go ahead, 6 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you to our witnesses for their testimony. It was great to be able to have three different dimensions in terms of the inspection side, generally the farm advocacy group through Ms. Robinson, and of course a local farmer. The majority of my questions are going to be placed to Ms. Hatcher, who is from the Annapolis Valley. Ms. Hatcher, Kim, you mentioned the fact that there's been a huge uptake in local food, that the farmers market in Wolfville is simply doing very well because there seems to be more people buying local. How important is it for the online component in terms of being able to have consumers use the CSA and be able to go on, and has that created efficiencies for you as a business as well?
Thank you. It's the online portion is critical at this juncture because, of course, the physical markets thus far, with the exception of a few markets that are doing pickup at pre-order and drop-off only, the online avenue is the only way to go at this point. So for those vendors such as myself, there is no other option to bring our products to the consumers that's in any sort of efficient or financially viable way for us to do that individually. So the fact that we've had online sales for since 2017 with the Wolfville Farmers Market meant that we were already ahead of the game, in that platform was already figured out, it was already running, and it's since exploded.
Obviously, in the Valley, there's been a deindustrialization of some of the processing capability that we have locally. You talked passionately about the ability to try to bring back more local capacity, if I could use that word. I had the conversation with Earl Kidston today in Centerville. How important would it be for government to work with, whether it's smaller producers like yourself up to larger producers, particularly in Nova Scotia around greenhouse production, to try to extend our growing seasons even further, perhaps into the winter months?
Yeah, that's on our current farm plan as it is with our farm expansion, is to have greenhouses in place to do greens productions through the winter. Right now, our province is basically,
Pardon me, Ms. Hatcher, could you hold the mic, please?
Sorry. basically, our province currently has the option of the root vegetable selection all winter or imported goods that are out of season for us. I believe that our province wants to eat within season, but I really believe that with greenhouse production, we could change what in season means to us and bring a substantially more varied and definitely healthful diet to the majority of our province.
Our government introduced the first food policy in this country's history. This last week, Minister Bibeau announced the Local Food Infrastructure Fund. You mentioned Jenny Osborne in our community, who's been a passionate advocate. What does it mean to be able to have access through the federal government to support local food infrastructure, to support maybe some of the work that Jenny and others are doing to try to drive that local demand?
Well, I think particularly when we're looking at what would be considered a massive customer base, i.e., the Nova Scotia school districts, those dollars would literally fund farms seasonally, throughout their farming journey, whether they need to shut down over the winter or not. Having funding that support those programs, and therefore those programs being able to access locally grown products would be instrumental in allowing our farming communities to stay vibrant and to stay healthy and to be able to bring our products to market in a long-term sustainable way.
Probably have about another minute before I wanted to ask a few questions of Ms. Robinson, but we have the Kentville Research Center in of course, Kentville in the Annapolis Valley. It has a long history of serving producers, both small and large. Can you speak to how important regional research is going to be in the days ahead after COVID?
I think it's going to be pretty fundamental. I access several of the services at the Kentville Research Center for our farm, including water testing. Because this is new for all of us, I think research is going to play a huge part in how we deal with this, what our future plans are, and how our province is going to continue to deal with the after effects and how to move forward, during this and after this pandemic.
Well, thank you very much. I'll turn a few questions to Ms. Robinson. Obviously, you mentioned business risk management. That's something we've heard loud and clear on the Agriculture Committee through a variety of different commodity groups. You mentioned that had there been a more robust package, which I assume is 85% reference margin, which industry has been calling for, that essentially 75% of that $2.6 billion that CFA has referenced would be covered. With the existing program of the 70% reference margin, do you have a certain percentage of what would be covered? I understand you mentioned we had put $252 million in addition to the $200 million for the Canadian Dairy Commission, but how much would be covered under BRM? What percentage? Do you have that number?
I do not have that number, but I will get it for you, Mr. Boyce.
So obviously, as I understand it, 75%, and maybe it would be 50% or 40% or 30% of that 2.6 billion would be covered, though. That's my understanding in terms of the numbers.
I don't know.
Okay.
I think to speak to the larger issue with BRM, because it is broken in the view of most Canadian producers, the participation levels have certainly dropped off in a staggering level. So many people just don't have confidence in the program that it's going to fulfill their needs, so they just simply don't subscribe.
And we've heard that. I want to get to that.
Thank you, Mr. Bly.
Sorry.
Boyce.
Thank you.
Sorry.
Mr. Chair, you might be on mute.
It's difficult. Thank you. I would also advise the witnesses that if they have any additional information, such as Mr. Boyce asked for, or that you offered to Mr. Boyce, to send it to the committee through the clerk, and it will be translated and distributed in both official languages. We go now to Mr. Thériault. Monsieur Thériault, allez-y. 6 minutes, s'il vous plaît.
You have 6 minutes, Mr. Thériault. Please go ahead. Chair, we've agreed with the clerk that I would take the first 6 minutes, if that's acceptable for you, sir.
Go ahead.
Okay, merci.
Thank you very much. And good afternoon, colleagues, and thank you to all the witnesses for being here. It's always great to listen to people with as many skills as yourselves. I have a question to put to Ms. Robinson, first of all. when you came before the Standing Committee on Agriculture on the 8th of May, you pointed out that many farm businesses were not eligible for financial aid under the different programs related to COVID. 5 weeks later now, what is your reading of the situation? Are we better responding to the situation? Have the programs adapted in the meantime?
There have been any, sorry, you can hear me all right?
Yes. Do remember to speak up and speak slowly, please.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for the question. I don't believe there have been any changes to BRM in regard to the commodities that do not qualify for business risk management. Is that answering your question?
So in the last 5 weeks, there have not been any adjustments which have been made that have actually helped farmers with the different programs such as the CERB.
ERB. Okay, I thought you were asking specifically about the business risk management programs. We have seen allowances for the CEBA, the Emergency Business Account. That means that several producers who before did not qualify now do qualify. In regard to the the wage subsidy, the $2,000, we continue to run into that as competition as we try to convince people to come and work on farm. It seems that we can't entice them. There's generally, yeah, it's a competition, and convincing people to come to work can be challenging.
Parfait, merci.
Thank you very much. I have another question, Ms. Robinson. There's this 2.6 billion fund which has been asked for to help farmers. The federal response is around 252 million. Perhaps there have been some other crumbs that have been paid out afterwards. What are the specific financial needs that you have? Is there still a shortfall between the 2.6 billion and the 252 million that you received? Could you give us the exact financial figures that are needed?
Thank you for the question. Exact financial figures will be difficult. The $2.6 billion came to us by doing a cross-commodity scope. We surveyed all of our members, all commodities across the country, and 2 months ago, the estimate of losses was the $2.6 billion. In regard to the 252 million and what's not covered between that and the 2.6 billion, we know that we've got escalating costs due to COVID-related costs, such as PPE and modifications to make workplaces safe. We know we have lost markets. We know we've had food waste because we're trying to shift how food goes to market. Instead of it going to a food service customer, it's going now to a lot of retail customers, and that's been a difficult and costly shift to make. And moving forward, the uncertainty that the access to labor brings to us is one of the biggest concerns we have. And COVID certainly highlights the importance of coming up with a labor strategy. And we know that the work that the Canadian Agriculture Human Resource Council has done has highlighted that growing gap, and the fact that we have so many unfilled jobs in agriculture and what that costs not only farmers but the Canadian economy. It's extraordinary.
Donc, j'en conclus.
So we conclude that you are awaiting a response, funding responses from the governments, and you're talking about billions that are needed from the government. Time is ticking. So according to you, Ms. Robinson,
Doit-on s'attendre cet automne en termes
to you, Mrs. Robinson, what should we expect during the fall in terms of challenges for food supply? Mr. Chair, I mean, do I still have time? Oui, je vous donne un peu plus de temps. So during the fall, what should we expect in terms of food supply? Alors ça, c'est l'inconnu, l'incertitude de ce qui va se passer, l'incertitude. L'incertitude de ce qui va se passer.
Souhaitez-vous que je reprenne la question?
So would you like me to repeat the question once again? I don't know if you've heard my question. Should I repeat?
Ask Madam Clerk to just verify that the interpretation is working correctly.
I have heard the question.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Madam Clerk, I think your
We should
bandwidth
be-
is kind of gone. I can't hear what you're saying.
The kids are playing the games.
And you want
We should be good to go, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Monsieur Désolé, please go
Oui.
again with your question and we'll give it one more try.
OK. Désolé. Toujours selon pour Madame Robinson, selon vous, à quoi doit-on s'attendre cet été en termes d'approvisionnement alimentaire?
I believe the channels are switched because I'm hearing only the French.
No. Okay, the question is, what should we expect during the summer in terms of food supply?
I think it's difficult to forecast what food supply is going to look like in summer and in fall. The uncertainty is due a great deal because of access to labor. And there's also great uncertainty just in regard to how COVID is going to impact food supply chains. If we see interruption in processing, that will cause issues. Just generally, we hope for the best and plan for the worst.
Merci, Monsieur Désolé.
Thank you, Mr. Desilets. Now we will go to Mr. Davies. Mr. Davies, you have 6 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and to the witnesses for being. Mr. Murphy, according to a news release issued by the Agriculture Union on May 11th, under threat of discipline, the CFIA instructed some of its non-meat inspection staff to train up as, quote, instant, end quote, meat inspectors to be deployed to potentially COVID-19 infected meat slaughter plants, whether they wanted to work there or not. Could you inform this committee of how many non-meat inspection staff have been redeployed as instant meat inspectors?
Thank you for the question, and through you, Mr. Chair. To date, I'm not aware of any non-meat inspectors that have been deployed, but I know some have received training. In case there's a shortage of the current meat inspectors, that they would have to rely on these non-meat inspectors who've been retrained.
Okay. Can you inform the committee of how many CFIA inspectors have tested positive for COVID-19 to date?
So to date, the numbers that we received was approximately 40, or actually 40 was the numbers that we received. And that's a running total from the time that this started.
Okay. Now, according to that same news release, outreach to senior federal ministers by the Agriculture Union, according to your release, has all but been ignored to date. Has the federal government become any more responsive since that release was issued?
So after the release, I did I did get contacted by somebody from the Minister of Labour's office. We had a discussion and I expressed my concerns with regards to what was happening and transpiring in those plants. I did actually, after that release, get a phone call from the Minister of Health and had a discussion with the Minister of Health as well.
Good to hear. Now, you, in my view, described a very disturbing state of affairs with the lateness and lack of satisfactory response in protecting the health of inspectors. I'd like to get a current snapshot, if I could. Is CFIA currently assigning inspectors to more than one facility?
Yes, as of today, I checked, and that's still happening. So some inspectors who are they do what's called daily presence. They don't work for 8 hours or 10 hours in a plant. They go to various plants to check at on a daily presence. So they actually do go to different plants, and they're continuing that practice.
And is CFIA currently ordering inspectors to work in unsafe facilities without the proper personal protective equipment?
Well, in my opinion, yes, because I don't think that they have done a proper hazard assessment and determine what is the proper personal protective equipment in order to protect somebody from this biological hazard. So even the Public Health Agency and the provincial health agencies will agree that cloth face masks and non-surgical face masks do not protect the wearer from a biological hazard such as COVID-19. They help reduce the spread because the person who's wearing it's less likely that they will spread the virus if they're a carrier. But when we're talking personal protective equipment, it's designed to protect you against the hazard, and anything but a N95 mask or greater will not protect you against a biological hazard such as COVID-19.
Now, you outlined a plan that you think is necessary for us to put in place, and with, I think, pretty much a consensus that we will be facing a second wave or outbreak with almost certainty. It strikes me that we should be getting one. Have you had any response from the federal government about the plan and the details that you outlined as should be part of it?
No, I would have to say that we haven't had a response on our plan and our requests and our suggestions. Other than that, I know that the government and the agency are working very hard to procure more and more personal protective equipment, the surgical face masks, the N95s, and to put measures in place. But we haven't had a discussion with regards to implementing a solid plan in case we get the second wave.
Now, you've indicated you'd like to see routine testing as part of that plan. Tell us about the state of testing of CFIA staff.
Well, it's again, that's up to the individual provincial public health authorities. They determine when testing is done. So different provinces they deal with that in different ways. So that is one of the asks from us is that there be a consistent national approach to dealing with COVID-19. So if somebody is actually symptomatic, then the provincial health authority, once they're made aware of that, will make the determination if the person has to get tested, if they self-isolate, and the agency is deferring to the provincial health authority for that reason.
Have you had any response to your request that lines speeds be slowed down so that we could have greater physical distancing?
So when the plants had the outbreak and that they were trying to get things under control, many plants did slow down their line speeds. Since then, line speeds in many plants are back to normal.
And you've also indicated publicly that you would like the federal government to get off the sidelines, in your view, and exercise their responsibility and authority over federally regulated food processors instead of deferring to the provinces. Is the federal government exercising their full authority over federally regulated food processors in a satisfactory manner?
This is, of course, my opinion, but I don't think they are. I think they defer to the provincial health authorities to make a determination if these industries, if these facilities are able to operate or not. But CFIA is a federal agency, and our members come under the Canada Labour Code, which is the federal regulation, federal law and federal regulation. So it's the employer's responsibility, CFIA, to conduct their own hazard assessment and to make that determination of what is required in order to protect these food inspectors in these plants.
Thank you, Mr. Davies.
Thank you.
Thus ends round one. We go to round two with Mr. General. Mr. General, please go ahead. 5 minutes, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thanks to the witnesses for being here today. My question is, well, my first question, I guess, would go to Ms. Robinson. This week, applications open for the government surplus food purchase program, but only a small amount has been provided in funding, and we know that the amount of surplus food is much greater than the value of that. So how much funding would need to be allotted in order to purchase most of the surplus food supplies?
Thank you for the question, Mr. General. That's a great question. I don't know what the total amount is because we continue to see market volatility. So we're uncertain as producers where we're going to be able to sell and where we're not going to be able to sell. So overall, we continue to put crop in the ground, raise animals, and hope that we're going to be able to sell them. And until the animal or the produce goes to market and we get paid for it, we won't know the answer to that question, in my opinion. But it is certainly more than $50 million.
Wow. So how much then do you anticipate in terms of waste, pounds of food that will go to waste because of this? You have an estimate? Has there been any projections?
Again, a great deal of uncertainty as to what will actually make it to market. This surplus food fund is meant to divert a bunch of food from going to waste. We've seen several different components of the food supply chain trying to donate that food to make sure that the good of the food gets consumed and that we avoid waste. But I think the only way to answer your question will be with hindsight.
Right. Well, hopefully not, and hopefully not a lot. So the government has promised to create 700 agricultural jobs for students through the YES program, but it appears that funding was not approved as part of this recent amount of estimates released this month. Have you heard from any farmers as to whether they've been able to hire students yet through this program?
I have not specifically heard of people hiring through this program. I have heard frustration and concern in particular for smaller producers or newer entrants in regard to the CEBA program that there was announcements made that would be accessible, and then there was quite a time lag between when the announcement was made and when the funds actually became available for application. So there does seem to be this time lag. It's wonderful the announcements are made and it's wonderful the money becomes available, but it would be even more wonderful if those things happened in sync.
Yeah, no, I certainly agree with you. We've certainly heard that testimony over and over again that there's a lot of announcements being made, yet the action hasn't necessarily taken place. Certainly hearing from farmers here in Alberta, very, very similar comments to what you've indicated throughout your presentation. So appreciate you coming to the Health Committee and doing that. I do want to shift over to Mr. Murphy, though, if you don't mind. You mentioned that there were 40, to my colleague, Mr. Davies' question, that there were 40 inspectors who tested positive. Do you have the locations of those? Were they specific to one facility?
They were not, sorry, Mr. Chair, they were not specific to one facility. There was a positive test in Quebec, in Alberta, in Ontario, but the majority of them were in Alberta. There was actually 18 inspectors in the Cargill plant in Alberta were tested positive.
So of the 40, 18 of those were from Alberta, the Cargill plant?
Yes.
Great. So you also mentioned that the CFIA was late to protect inspectors. Approximately, what were some of the dates associated to that being late? Obviously we had our first case in January here of COVID-19 coming to Canada. When about did start even hearing from CFIA in terms of some of the protections being offered?
To nail down the date might be difficult, but I would say it was
approximately
Yeah, it was over a month, month and a half even, before the protections were put in place. As a matter of fact, and I attribute that to some of the confusion from the Public Health Agency, because in the beginning our members were told that they should not wear and they could not wear face coverings, even though some of those inspectors wanted to supply their own. And then, later on, it was decided that yes, face coverings would actually be helpful if everybody wore them. So that was confusing. So the face coverings were not available. The face shields were not available. Uh, some plants actually did manage to acquire both face coverings and face shields. And in those cases, CFIA told the plants that if you're going to provide your employees with that protection, you have to provide CFIA inspectors with that protection. But the plants that didn't provide those protections, see if those inspectors in those plants didn't get the protection. So there was no, in my opinion, the pause button should have been pushed. There should have been an assessment done and a determination made at that point in time of how we're going to protect everybody in those plants. And once that determination was made, then you move forward with your protections in place. It was piecemeal by by all in interpretation, in my opinion.
Thanks. Thank you, Mr. Murphy. And if you're able to provide us with any of those dates, would certainly be appreciated going forward. Thanks, Mr. Chair.
Sure.
Thank you, Mr. General. We go now to Mr. Kellaway. Mr. Kellaway, 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and hello to my colleagues again, and really like to thank the witnesses for their presentation today. My questions are going to be directed to Ms. Hatcher. And before I get into my questions, Ms. Hatcher, you mentioned about your pedigree, and I think your pedigree is just fine. Thank you very much. So we're glad to have you here. So I want to follow a similar line of questions that my colleague MP Blois talked about. Here in Cape Breton, we have a local organization. It's called the Pan Cape Breton Food Hub. And the Food Hub supports local food producers and works to help families across the island to ensure that they have the food security through these extremely challenging times. And they source their food entirely from local farmers and have garnered a lot of support from community members. So do you think, as challenging as the pandemic has been, that we'll start to see more support for local farmers and leadership from groups like the Cape Breton Food Hub to fight food insecurity across this country?
I definitely. I think as we live through the results of this pandemic, we're realizing how long our food chain is, and I think taking some really active steps to shorten it. I believe that support locally, whatever local means to you anywhere in Canada, will definitely increase with how long we've seen that our food chain actually is. I think the support is going to be overwhelming. I don't know that it's going to, if we can't get the food out of the fields, or if we can't have an avenue to sell the food, some of the support, as wonderful as it is not necessarily going to be as beneficial as it should be.
You talk about steps. So I'm thinking, Ms. Hatcher, if you had, I wouldn't say the magic pen, but if you had the steps to put in place, where would you start?
To put in place, do you mean to bring our products to market?
Yeah, I think that, and also the bigger picture in terms of food security, but let's start there.
Okay. To bring our products to market, I think, I can only speak for my province of Nova Scotia. I think we're doing a good job. The farmers markets in general, very, very quickly, those that didn't already have an online platform set up, switched to it very quickly, which was incredibly helpful for both consumer and producer. As an overall picture of food security, health of our citizens, from a food perspective, the things that I would put in place would definitely be the things that I alluded to: incentives for farmers, incentives for corporations that choose to purchase locally would be a massive one. If our hospital systems were purchasing their food locally, that would be an incredible revenue for whatever community they're based in.
Hospitals, restaurants, even universities that have
absolutely
have a large contingent of students throughout the country and throughout the world. So I really appreciate that. I want to stay with you. We know that there's a potential for a second wave in early September or sometime in the fall. And I'm wondering, over the past few months, have you adopted any new practices? I think you alluded to some of this in your opening statement that will support your organization should we have a second wave. And I guess what advice, we have a great platform here, what advice would you give to other food producing groups moving forward?
I think a second wave is inevitable, personal opinion. I think bolstering the food producers within your community and ensuring that you're supporting them is really the only way that we can strengthen our food system community by community. It doesn't necessarily start with the big boys or the medium farms or the large farms. Not to say that there is not an incredibly important place for them, but without our small producers and without community support for them, and without governments and municipal governments, provincial governments, federal governments, without those people standing behind and supporting that movement and saying that, yes, this is the preferred option, this is where you should be going, I don't think we really stand a chance, because people are getting frightened. And in many instances, when there are fear-based decisions, you're often going to go with the cheapest decision.
I particularly liked your opening statement. In particular, you talked about this being an opportunity to reform, and not just reform, but to reframe thinking and doing in the industry when it comes to local food security. And you're absolutely right. I think that is one of the first places to go, is the small farmers, but connected to other industry partners and all levels of government. So I thank you for that. Mr. Chair, how much time do I have left?
You're all out, so thank you.
Okay, thank you very much.
We go now to Ms. Jansen. Ms. Jansen, please go ahead. 5 minutes.
Yes, hi. I want to direct my questions to Mary Robinson. I myself am a retired farmer, used to be producing out of 28 greenhouse acres, both floral and vegetable. And I have to say, for many years, I was very concerned that all levels of government were basically attacking the farming sector, making it almost impossible to do our work. Kind of like, I kept saying they've been coming after the resource sector and we're next. So it feels right now, when I look at the way that Minister Bibeau has been responding to the needs of farmers, that they're basically expecting, farmers, on the backs of farmers, to create food security. I'm just wondering, what are you thinking? Do you feel that we've had, a reasonable response to the needs that the farmers are facing?
Thank you for the question, Ms. Jensen. And nice to know that you're a former farmer. Excellent.
And I'm a conservative, so I've been fighting for farmers.
I think no one in agriculture wants to appear ungrateful for the help that has been offered to agriculture to date. Help is help, and we will take what we can get, but we certainly would appreciate more. I think in regard to how we feel, well, I guess it was the Conservative government that changed the BRM suite of programs, so I probably need to say that out loud too. So I think in general, the people that I'm looking at on my screen, I implore with them to take into consideration that the future of our country depends on the future of our family farms. And I think everyone that is a member of Parliament needs to really understand that, and needs to understand that primary producers are price takers. They have no opportunity to pass on things like carbon tax or cost additional in regards to protecting everyone from COVID on our farms or the loss of markets. All of these costs that we bear just erode a very thin bottom line.
Absolutely. They have absolutely been pounding farmers with new regulations, new taxes. I mean, honestly, I feel terrible. My son took over the farm, and I sometimes think, wow, what did I put the poor guy into? The BRMs, for instance, it's like they pat you on the head and they say, there's money in the BRMs. Well, they're not working. They know they're not working. And then they tell us that that's where the solution is. I was talking to a friend who's in the chicken processing industry, and he was saying that they're, I guess, down like 7.5% across the country in what they're processing, and they're asking us to, to ensure that there's food security. But we're the ones that are taking on all the risks, all the costs. I'm just wondering, how do you think we're going to encourage farmers to invest in their farms when we don't have any clarity from government where we're going, we don't have the support that we need? How can we farmers be expected to ensure that there's food when we don't have the right kind of support?
I think there's a wonderful opportunity right now for a very clear message to come from government to our spectacular agriculture sector. We're the envy of most of the world in regard to our natural resources as well as our farming acumen. So now is an opportunity for government to send a message to all of the Canadian food chain that investing in Canadian food production and the food value chain is a wonderful place to invest. We see businesses moving south of the border because of issues where they say it's too difficult to operate within Canada. So generally, we need to address that side of things. We also need to have a very big look at our labor strategy. We need to get our labor issues sorted out.
Right. I know you were mentioning, the CERB, it's a bit of a competition. And again, talking to another farmer friend who's saying, people can make more money staying at home than working. And the Conservatives have been asking, could we not find a better way to implement this so that we don't disincentivize people from coming back to the farm? Without people working on the farm, we can't produce food. So I wonder if you could speak to that a little bit more as well.
Well, government is in the job of fixing these problems, not the Canadian Federation of Agriculture. I would instead defer to your expertise on that.
Thank you. And then I think one thing that has really concerned me as well is the mental health of farmers. I mean, we have been waiting and waiting. We've been told over and over, go for the BRMs. That's going to be your solution, when we all know it's not. We're told, keep on paying your carbon tax. It's not that big of a deal. And farmers are, they come to the end of their rope. Are you hearing more about the challenges that farmers are facing in regards to mental health issues?
Absolutely. Absolutely. We see so much stress placed on farmers because as you would understand, it's very complex. It's a highly emotional business to be in. I'm sixth generation. My family's 200 years. So the generation that loses it is the one that really loses it. So I think the stresses within agriculture right now are at an all-time high, and it is devastating to see how that impacts so many families.
Thank you, Ms. Jansen. We go now to Dr. Pawlowski. Dr. Pawlowski, go ahead, 5 minutes.
Well, Ms. Hatcher, I'm very happy to hear about your hot sauce, and I would point out Mr. Fisher, Mr. Kellaway, and Cody. I see no excuse why you guys shouldn't be bringing us some of that hot sauce to Ottawa. So I'm expecting it now. Now I want to ask my questions actually to Mr. Murphy. The first one, I assume that you're asking for the N95 masks because you feel that especially the meat packing plants are high risk enough that you want to have the maximum protection. Am I right with that?
Yes, I would. In my opinion, when you do a hazard assessment, you determine how you're going to protect somebody from a hazard. So if you can eliminate the hazard or reduce the hazard to the lowest possible level, and putting in measures such as social distancing or personal distancing, when they don't work, you have to implement then personal protective equipment. And the personal protective equipment has to address the hazard. So wearing a cloth mask to protect you against a biological hazard such as COVID-19 it doesn't work. I'm sorry.
Okay, so you want the N95 masks, and as of yet you don't have them. Am I right with that?
I would, yes. Okay,
now my next question is probably asking you a question with maybe a different hat on, because I assume you're an inspector yourself in the Canadian Food Inspection Agency, and something that's kind of occurred to me, and I haven't heard a response to, and maybe I just haven't Googled the question, but when you have places like Cargill where 50% of the workers get COVID-19, and then you also have temporary foreign workers working in farms who have outbreaks of COVID-19, you deal with food-related health risks. That's your job. What is the risk to the public when you have people on the assembly line with COVID-19? Because I know the virus can live a fairly lengthy period of time on other surfaces. So what, if any, do you think the risk is? I'm sure there there's probably some risk, but is there a substantial risk to the public when you're having people who are working on the lines who have infections when this food's coming out to us and we're buying them in the supermarket?
Okay, so just want to qualify that I'm not an inspector. I come from agriculture and agri-food. So, and with that department, I was a health and safety advisor. So many of my members, as president of the agriculture union, are inspectors. I talk to them every day, and I visited these plants myself. So what we've been told, and from the public health agency, is that there is no hazard to the public when it comes to the food that's being produced in there. And I think that's why we haven't seen outbreaks in the community from a foodborne illness. If it was Listeria or E. coli, then yes, absolutely, that will survive on the food and could be transmitted then to the public. But in the case of COVID-19, there's no evidence, to my knowledge, that that can be transmitted through the food chain.
Okay, my next question is about local foods. I certainly love my local market. I'm waiting to get a shipment of meat in from a local rancher, grass-fed beef. I think a lot of people prefer the quality of food when it's grown locally. Ms. Hatcher talked about heirloom vegetables. I think they taste better. However, places like Walmart can sell food a lot cheaper, and for a lot of people on limited incomes, that savings is really fundamental. So what can agricultural producers do to make their food more affordable to people on limited income, not just people like myself who have a better income?
So I guess that's a very good question. And obviously, when you mass produce anything, then you can the producers usually can lower their costs here. I agree with you 100% that sometimes the quality is better for the smaller producers. I think buying locally is very important, especially going to be after COVID-19. That it would be very important. How we tackle bringing those prices down or keeping those prices down, I think, is a very good question. But when you look at industrializing food production, like what we have done in the meat production facilities here, then you introduce the other risks that go along with that, where you have up to 1,000 people working in one plant on a shift, and if something goes wrong, such as a virus that's going to affect people, then that's going to spread pretty rapidly. That's going to have a negative impact on the food production in our country. We've had situation previously with the XL beef plant where they had a large E. coli outbreak out there, and that plant shut down for months. And actually, that plant then was bought by somebody else because of that. So you have to weigh the balance, I think, when it comes to producing food really cheaply, and then producing food that it's going to have that quality that you referred to.
Thank you, Dr. Pulaski. Nous allons maintenant à Monsieur.
We are now moving to Mr. Thériault or Mr. Desilets. Mr. Thériault, please go ahead. Thank you. 2.5 minutes. Well, that's a bit short. Ms. Robinson, let's talk about the seasonal temporary workers and several farmers in my writing to consider that it is complete failure and that the management by the government this year of this program is a complete failure. First of all, they announced mid-March that foreign workers would be allowed to come in, but the responsibility for quarantine was passed on to the shoulders of producers, and they also put a lump sum of 500, I'm not sure how many dollars, and people had to be busy with bureaucratic tasks in order to justify the $1,500 per worker, whereas they would have been more useful in the field. So most of the producers have only been able to sow half of their fields, and at halfway through the season, only half of the temporary workers had arrived. Don't you think it's a failure? And what should have been done differently in order to avoid the failure?
Thank you for the question. I think I've said earlier that the COVID has certainly highlighted for us the importance of the need for a more strategic discussion in regard to how we address the shortages in agriculture labor. With our temporary foreign worker access, international workers have certainly been coming into this country over half a century. We have multi-generations. They're incredibly important and vital to so many operations in every province across the country. I think the producers have been given $1,500 to offset some of the costs in regard to isolation. There have been frustrations with the isolation and with the delay in bringing people in and the breakdown in communications. Unfortunately, I think a good deal of this is just a reality of COVID and how it's impacted every government in every country and every citizen of the world. I think it's unfortunate that farmers have to bear the brunt of this. And I fear, as Ms. Hatcher said, when we have our second wave, what the implications are going to be for when we go to harvest.
Merci, Monsieur Thériault.
Thank you, Mr. Thériault.
Go ahead, 2 minutes and a half.
Thank you, Mr. Murphy. A little over a month ago, the Agriculture Union said that CFIA is ordering its staff to work in facilities that obviously are not safe and without the proper personal protective gear. The agency seems to be unaware of assurances Deputy Prime Minister Freeland gave to the House of Commons just a few days ago. Have CFIA inspectors faced any disciplinary measures for refusing to work in facilities that they believe are unsafe due to COVID-19?
So thank you for the question. Right now, no, there's been no disciplinary measures, and we've only had two what's called an official right to refuse under the Canada Labour Code because our members fall under federal jurisdictions. Those complaints, the right to refuses, were resolved at the local level, and the workers went back to work. So to answer your question, there's been no discipline today.
Okay, good to hear. Now, you said in your testimony that someone stated that there were no safety issues at Cargill, end quote. Who was it that stated that?
That statement came from a supervisor that said not that there was no issues, but that the plant had put in a process in order to protect workers at the Cargill plant to mitigate the hazards, and they were going to implement social distancing. They were putting plexiglass barriers between the workstations. They were issuing face shields. So the statement came from a supervisor in the Alberta region to try and reassure our inspectors that it was safe to go back in and go to work there.
Now, was that before or after you said half of 2,000 workers and half of the inspectors at that Cargill plant became infected?
I believe that was before that.
So what's the situation now at the Cargill plant?
So the situation now is that Cargill is back to production. I believe they're back to full line speeds again. They're monitoring things very closely, and we're not hearing that there's another outbreak or there's not a lot of positive cases of new positive cases of COVID-19. That could be for a number of reasons. We're not seeing it across the country, so perhaps it's because of the time of year and things are settling down.
And I just want to ask you quickly about virtual inspections. I understand that there might be a move by CFIA to not have in-person inspection, but virtual inspection. What's your view on that?
I have heard that that's something the CFIA is looking into. I'm skeptical, to be quite honest, because our inspectors are actually, they can stop the line when the carcass is going by. If they see an anomaly, they can manipulate the carcass to look closely. It's going to be, I think it's going to be interesting to see how that would happen. But if I'm doing an inspection on something, I want to be there in person as far as I'm concerned.
Thank you, Mr. Davies.
Thank you.
So that brings round two to a close, and I would like to thank our panel for sharing your time with us and all of your expertise and all your great answers to our questions. We will now suspend as we bring in our second panel. So the meeting is now suspended. back, everyone. We are resuming meeting number 28 of the House of Commons Standing Committee on Health. We are operating pursuant to the order of reference of May 26, 2020. The committee is resuming its briefing on the Canadian response to the outbreak of the coronavirus. On behalf of the new witnesses, I'd like to advise that before speaking, please wait until I recognize you by name, or during the questioning, the questioner will indicate to whom he wishes to direct the question. When you are ready to speak, you can click on the microphone icon to activate your mic. A reminder that all comments should be addressed to the chair. Interpretation in this video conference will work very much like in a regular committee meeting. You have the choice at the bottom of your screen of either Floor, English, or French. As you are speaking, if you plan to alternate from one language to the other, you will need also to switch the interpretation channel so it aligns with the language you are speaking. You may want to allow for a very short pause when switching languages. And when you're not speaking, your mic should be on mute. So I would like to now welcome our second panel of witnesses. From the Canadian Food Inspection Agency, we have Ms. Colleen Barnes, Vice President, Policy and Programs, and Ms. Teresa Giuliano, Vice President, Operations. For the Canadian Food Inspection Agency, please go ahead. You have 10 minutes for a statement.
Good day. Just before I start, am I being heard appropriately?
You're very weak, so if you could speak up and forcefully, and you know, it will help the translators quite a lot.
Okay. My name is Teresa Giuliano, and I am the Vice President of Operations for the Canadian Food Inspection Agency. I'd like to thank the committee for the opportunity to talk about this important issue. More specifically, I appreciate being able to provide details about how the CFIA supports the Canadian response. As you all know, the COVID-19 pandemic is a human crisis that requires governments and industry to work together and to be agile, caring, and smart. In April 2020, the Government of Canada committed $20 million to the CFIA to support critical food inspections that help ensure that Canadians will have continued access to safe, high-quality food to feed their families. The CFIA is a science-based regulatory agency. In the face of COVID-19, the CFIA took immediate and decisive action to protect the integrity of the Canadian food supply and to protect our—
I'm sorry, Ms. Giuliano, it's way weak. Could you speak a lot louder?
I'm going to turn to my colleague, Colleen Barnes. I believe she has better sound quality, and she'll take over.
Thank
you. Thank you, Mr. Chair. I think Teresa was at the point of saying that CFIA is a science-based regulatory agency, and in the face of COVID, the agency took immediate and decisive action to protect the integrity of Canada's food supply and to protect our employees. These are the areas that we would like to address today in our remarks. To support a stable food supply and the work of thousands of food businesses, the CFIA has taken steps to maintain vital inspection services. The agency has hired 144 new inspectors and 44 veterinarians as of June 11th. We've welcomed back some who recently retired, reassigned staff to priority areas, and funded more overtime. This is being done to maintain capacity, and these measures enable us to continue fulfilling our mission without placing undue burden on our employees. The CFIA is also working with some provincial counterparts to train and equip provincial inspectors to provide the CFIA with inspection support on a temporary as-needed basis. Mr. Chair, you can see how an effective response requires a collaborative approach. The CFIA is monitoring and responding to the pandemic by consulting regularly with employees, unions, provincial and territorial partners, international trading partners, and industry. Whether on the front lines or working remotely, safeguarding the wellness of CFIA employees is a top priority. When COVID-19 outbreaks occurred in meat slaughterhouses, the CFIA told these businesses they needed to put
a response plan in place and provide a safe workplace for inspectors. When outbreaks occurred, we worked with local and provincial public health authorities, labor ministries, occupational health and safety experts, unions, and staff to ensure that appropriate measures were in place before we resumed the inspection service. To further protect staff, the CFIA created a health self-assessment tool for inspectors, expanded leave options, and reduced face-to-face interactions between field staff and industry. For situations where inspectors are not able to physically distance, the agency has procured masks, face shields, and other protective equipment for critical service employees. Taken together with risk mitigation measures put in place by industry, we are seeing positive results with no new COVID cases reported among CFIA employees since early May. Now we wanted to talk a little bit about our work with industry. To ease the burden on industry and support the food supply for Canadians, CFIA has introduced temporary compliance flexibilities. The changes include suspending some CFIA compliance activities for non-food safety labeling requirements and delaying compliance activities for parts of the Safe Food for Canadians regulations that come into force in July of this year. Working with the provinces, we have implemented a protocol that can be used in the case of meat shortages that would allow provincially regulated meat to cross into other provinces. In addition, given the impacts we are seeing on stakeholders, the CFIA has delayed the timelines for all its regulatory initiatives in our forward regulatory plan. Further, the CFIA and the U.S. Department of Agriculture have agreed to provide a 6-month extension for approved facilities to continue to export certain animal products and pet foods between the two countries. This helps to maintain bilateral trade during the pandemic. Notwithstanding this flexibility, industry remains responsible for the safety and quality of the food that it produces, imports, and exports. Despite the current pandemic situation, the CFIA will continue to exercise its enforcement discretion as appropriate. For me, this evolving situation highlights the importance of continued collaboration and communication between the CFIA, industry partners, and other stakeholders. Je vais terminer en français.
And I will just finish in French. Chairman, just one moment. The speaker has now switched to French. Mr. Chair, obviously, there's still more work to be done in order to stay ahead of the pandemic. Every day, the CFIA, our partners, and the industries that we're regulating have to deal with unprecedented challenges because of COVID-19. So it demands the best of us. For the agency, the CFIA, we will continue to monitor the pandemic closely, as well as rethinking procedures and innovating where possible as we work with our stakeholders towards a common goal, namely to carry on delivering the frontline services that support our way of life in Canada. Thank you.
Thank you. We go now to the Department of Agriculture and Agri-Food. Mr. Seppi or Mr. Georgidis, please go ahead.
Merci,
you have,
Monsieur
10
le
minutes
Président. Nous vous remercions de l'occasion qui nous est donnée de discuter.
Thank you very much for this occasion to talk about the impacts of COVID-19 and this pandemic on agriculture and agri-food sectors and the way in which the Government of Canada has responded to this. The current situation is stressful for agri-food operators. Our food production system has nevertheless shown strong resilience since the beginning of the COVID-19 pandemic, ensuring the continued and reliable provision of food to the Canadian population. The food system has seen unanticipated declines in demand from some industries such as food services and spikes in demand from retailers. This has created short-term challenges across the whole supply chain. The government has been working with processors, producers and provinces to rapidly assess shifting demands, share critical information and come up with solutions to address the impacts of COVID-19 on the agriculture and agri-food sector. And we have seen that there have been significant stresses in the system early in the crisis. For example, some meat processing plants had to significantly reduce slaughter capacity or temporarily close due to impacts of COVID-19. And this has presented challenges for livestock producers upstream who need to feed animals for longer periods of time without being able to send them to a processing plant. The horticulture sector is another critical component of Canada's food system. Our food supply in fruits and vegetables is highly dependent on access to labour, trade and the timely transportation of goods. It is also vulnerable to weather, disease, insect pests, as well as access to crucial inputs such as bees for pollination.
Switching to English. On the health and safety side, every day, workers in the food supply, from the field and the barn and to the processing plant and beyond to retail stores, are playing an essential and critical role in securing our food supply. To ensure their health and safety, food processors, among others, across the country have adopted new measures, including investments in additional personal protective equipment, temperature testing of employees with scanners, and retrofitting facilities to include plexiglass shields on processing lines. In addition, Agriculture Canada, with the help of the Public Health Agency of Canada, has developed an evergreen document bringing together existing and relevant federal public health guidance for the agriculture and the agri-food sector to help the sector implement measures to mitigate the spread of COVID-19. The availability of a range of personal protection equipment for the food sector remains a challenge. For example, the use of masks is a common practice in meat processing facilities to mitigate the spread of COVID-19. However, some food processors, particularly the smaller facilities, are facing challenges procuring stable supplies of PPEs. And as the growing season is underway, farmers are also facing challenges accessing the PPEs they need and use on a daily basis to protect themselves from hazards, such as inhaling spores when handling and caring for mushrooms, or when using crop protection products. The Canadian and global supply of PPEs is slowly growing. The government and provinces have been very active in working to increase the Canadian supply of PPEs, and they have developed a number of mechanisms to improve access through supply hubs and programs to support PPE purchases, which we hope will help alleviate some of the pressures the sector is currently facing. And now I would like to turn to Mr. Jurgirtis to continue on our behalf. Thank you.
Thank you, Frederic, and thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you for welcoming me back to this committee without a cat this time. So I'll start with temporary foreign workers and labor. Labor challenges have been an ongoing issue for the sector, and we are continuing to look at ways to address these. Attracting Canadians to certain jobs in the sector has proven difficult despite efforts to increase wages with provinces and territories, recruitment campaigns, and job portals. Fact remains that we rely on temporary foreign workers, or TFWs, to fill critical jobs in the sector. Early on in the pandemic, the Government of Canada recognized the need to ensure that TFWs could continue to safely enter Canada and worked quickly to put in place an important exemption from travel restrictions. While ESDC and IRCC are responsible for administering the TFW program, AAFC is working closely with them and has put in place a team to assist with logistical issues and to share information. We also work closely with our provincial and territorial counterparts and employers to help get TFWs into Canada. As of mid-June, there are close to 32,000 TFWs in Canada, with more than 21,000 of those having arrived since the travel exemptions were granted. Despite this progress, there remains a gap in the total number of TFWs when compared to 2019, and a risk that shortfalls in labor could negatively impact harvesting capacity. At the same time, the sector has been impacted by a number of COVID-19 outbreaks. Most recently, there have been increased reports of outbreaks on farms in Ontario and other parts of the country. We were saddened to learn about the recent deaths of 2 workers from Mexico, and we understand Mexico's recent decision to temporarily pause the arrival of some workers to certain farms in Canada while they examine information about the outbreaks and measures being taken to protect all workers from further spread. We will work closely with the Mexican government, provincial authorities, and the sector to ensure that workers can continue to arrive and stay safe while in Canada. Testing and inspections are key elements to identify origins of outbreaks, protect workers, and prevent future outbreaks. Provinces are taking action by engaging with provincial public health agencies and increasing the frequency of inspections. Ensuring the health and safety of all workers, whether they are domestic or foreign workers, is a top priority. And I will switch to French. Donc, je pourrais continuer.
So I will continue in French now. In order to reduce the immense pressures being placed on Canadian agri-businesses and producers, the Government of Canada has created several initiatives to support the sector. For example, we have recently launched an emergency processing fund to the tune of $77.5 million to help food producers and processors. And there are also measures that have been put in place to help to attract additional workers, such as enhancements to the Youth Employment and Skills Programme to fund up to 700 new positions for youth, and also $50 million for the Mandatory Isolation Support for Temporary Foreign Workers Programme, and also an additional $5 billion in lending capacity through Farm Credit Canada, and an investment of $100 million for helping the Canadian population to get access to local agriculture infrastructure, and $50 million also for the Surplus Food Rescue Programme, to name but a few programs. So the sector is continuing to deal with these issues, which will stretch out, no doubt, over the medium term. And we have also seen that farmers, processors and retailers are adapting to put new protocols in place, respect new rules and regulations, and find new ways to continue to ensure a supply of safe food for the Canadian population. We want to ensure the health and safety of agriculture and agri-food producers, processors and manufacturers, as well as the safety of all Canadians, remains our priority as we continue to explore new ways to adapt to this situation as it evolves. Thank you.
I'm sorry, I think I missed the end. You've completed your statement, Mr. Georgidis?
Oui, merci. J'ai terminé.
Yes, I have completed my statement. Thank you.
So thank you for your statements. We will now start our questioning. Now we will do 2 rounds of questions. We will start round 1 with Dr. Kitchen. Dr. Kitchen, please go ahead, 6 minutes.
Thank you, everybody, for being here today in your presentations. I'm going to start with the CFIA and just a couple of questions, clarifications, if I can. You talked about how the CFIA and the U.S. Department of Agriculture provide a 6-month extension. When was that 6-month extension going to expire?
I don't have that with me, but we can get it to the committee, and I'll have to follow up. I don't know the exact date, but
when was it established?
Again, I'll have to get back to you with the date. What happens is that the U.S. comes up and audits our facilities from time to time. And so the extension was a period when they wouldn't be coming because no regulators are really traveling right now to do these kinds of audits. So it was a grace period, if you will, when they wouldn't shut off trade, but would allow that trade to continue.
But if it was done back in March, 6 months is almost up. So I mean, definitely I'd like to, but anyway, I'll go on. You did bring in an issue about that we should have a response. You went to companies, in particular Cargill, et cetera, and said they had to have a response plan in place. Is that not CFI's job to make certain that that response plan was in place before even the COVID virus started?
We asked, we put out guidance to industry very early in the pandemic, indicating that they should have a response plan in place to respond to any outbreaks in their establishments. And that was in place very early on in the pandemic.
But part of PHAC's position is for PHAC to have established protocols in place for hospitals, et cetera, as well as food agencies, et cetera. And I'm surprised that such a response plan would not be in place prior to COVID actually even coming into existence.
Teresa, maybe I can take that one. So it goes a bit, COVID-19 is not a food safety issue. So the CFIA, that's the extent of our purview. So what we did was make the plants have plans in place so that our employees were safe going in there, but we had no authority over the the responses of the plants to the COVID-19. That really went to local public health.
Okay, thank you, appreciate that. Since the onset of COVID-19, there's been major issues with the spread of the virus at meat processing plants, as you've indicated. One concern was the inspectors could be vectors of the virus, transmitting it from plant to plant. There was also a problem with the shortage of PPE for workers, which contributed to one of the biggest outbreaks in the country at the Cargill plant. Can you tell us what the situation is with respect to access to PPE right now?
At the moment, we have sufficient PPE for our meat inspectors. We are providing them with disposable masks, either cloth or surgical masks.
Pardon me, Ms. Giuliano, the interpreters just can't hear you. Can you shout it out, perhaps?
We are providing, we have a sufficient supply of masks and visors for meat inspection staff at the moment.
Okay, thank you. We heard from previous witness in the previous hour that they had talked about the fact that at Cargill, the inspectors were coming in without their own equipment. And that makes no sense to me when CFIA gets over $749 million a year, why they wouldn't be able to provide protection equipment to their employees. So I'm wondering why that's the case.
We began providing personal, we began providing.
Nous avons commencé à fournir des équipements. L'interprète regrette, mais le son n'est pas suffisant pour assurer le travail.
Mr. Chair, there's interruption with.
Monsieur le Président, il y a des.
Yes, Dr. Kitchen, the translators can't hear Ms. Giuliano. They can't translate.
I understand that, but I'm hearing the French as opposed to the English, and I'm sure Ms. Giuliano is hearing that same thing, and that's interrupting her time. And I'm assuming that this is not cutting into my time in my speech or my question.
I will make some allowances, absolutely. So let's try again with your question with Ms. Giuliano.
Mr. Chair, as soon as the public health advice on the use of masks evolved, we immediately procured masks for our frontline staff. Those masks were deployed in late March, and we began deploying face shields in mid to late April.
How often do you look at the expiry dates of these masks?
Our occupational health and safety experts would take that into consideration, absolutely.
Good, because I just received these from the House of Commons, and they say they have a 1-year date, and one would assume that's based on the date of when they were made, and you can't find that date on here. So I'm just curious to make certain that you're protecting your employees and that is being followed appropriately. Thank you. I'm sure.
Dr. Kitchen, you've gone mute. Dr. Kitchen, you're muted. You're muted.
Oh, somehow I hit that. I appreciate that.
Point of order, Mr. Chairman. Are we allowed to use props?
My question actually is to the agriculture and agri-food, and I'm sure they're aware that the minister's statement that the approximate maximum cost per farm for grain drying due to the carbon tax is $819, with some places being as low as $210. She says that because of this, farmers do not deserve a cost exemption when in the midst of this global pandemic. Todd Lewis, the chair of the Agriculture Producers Association of Saskatchewan, or APAS, has stated that with respect to the minister's statement, the numbers do not make sense to him, as some of his farmers are spending upward of $10,000 in carbon tax on grain drying. And I can vouch for that because I have many of my constituents who also have showed me bills of that immense amount. Department officials have stated that the numbers quoted by the minister came from submissions from a number of groups, one of which was APAS. So can you tell us why there's such a huge discrepancy between what the minister said and what our farmers are saying?
Hi, thank you for the question. Perhaps I'll offer an answer, although it's not in my area of responsibility, so I wouldn't be able to get into specifics. What I can say is that you're correct in saying that it is an amalgamation of different information and numbers that did come into the department, and I've been informed that additional information and numbers for additional clarification will be made public shortly. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Kitchen. We'll go now to Ms. Sidhu. Ms. Sidhu, please go ahead, 6 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you all the witnesses for being here with us. My question is to CFIA, Mr. Liano or Ms. Brand can answer that. I have a Maple Lodge farm in my riding meeting processing plant. There was outbreak and I heard you hired 144 inspectors. So I just want to know what you guys are doing to protect these workers and ensure meat processing plant like Maple Lodge are able to operate safely during COVID-19.
Thank you for your question. We take a number of measures to ensure that our workers can operate in a safe environment. Obviously, the health and safety of our staff is a #1 priority. It starts with following the advice of public health authorities, and that includes everything from hand hygiene to social distancing to the use of masks and shields where these measures cannot be respected.
Ms. Sidhu, could you raise your mic a bit? And Ms. Juliano, just remember, loud and proud.
Thank you. We've issued guidance to our inspectors on operating in this COVID environment. And this guidance includes undertaking safety assessments before they enter a plant and after each shift. And we've also issued guidance to the industry on mitigation measures that they need to take.
Thank you. In April 2020, federal government invested $20 million in a CFIA to ensure our food supply was secure. Do you think this investment is successfully achieving the goal?
Yes, we certainly do. It's permitted us to hire this extra surge capacity that we've needed. It's also allowed us to finance some overtime for our inspectors because of changes in the shifts that the plants want to run. It also has helped us train new inspectors or give refresher training to our staff. It's allowed us to make investments in IMIT tools for them to use as well.
Thank you. My next question is to the Department of Agriculture, Agri-Food. Throughout COVID-19, we heard the farmers having to dump their product as they are not being able to distribute it. What impact will the Surplus Food Rescue Program have in addressing this issue to supporting vulnerable Canadians? Can you explore that?
Yeah, this is
go ahead, Frédéric.
Yeah, thank you. This is Frédéric Sepe. Thank you for your question. And we think that we are constantly in discussions with producers to monitor the situation of the surplus. And while we don't have precise quantities of what is the food that is currently in surplus, we are confident that we will receive, working with food banks who are the one that would that are already discussing with producer groups to take advantage of the program, that would be able to identify the food that is probably the closest to their end of life, and be able to prioritize the support to those products that have a shorter shelf life. Some of the surplus food is in storage in frozen form and can last several months, but there's some type of food such as potatoes that have a much shorter shelf life. So we'll try to prioritize these products that have a shorter life.
Thank you. In April, government announced 100 million emergency fund to support national, regional, and local organizations across Canada that are able to reach people and communities experiencing food insecurity and who have been impacted by COVID-19. Do you think this fund is helping this type of program, or are you collecting any data?
Perhaps, Steve, you would be better placed to answer that question.
Sure. Thank you for the question. We have received indication that it certainly has been helping. A large amount of the funds have been distributed out to major food bank organizations and have gotten out to smaller organizations across the country as well. I don't currently have data in terms of to what degree all of the funds have been expended or what impact it has had, but we can certainly see what information that we can provide back to the committee.
Thank you. Mr. Chairman, do I have more time?
You have 1 more minute.
Okay, so I'll get back to CFIA. What steps CFIA taking to ensure our food supplies remain strong if possible, if the second wave of COVID-19 in the fall?
Maybe I can start and Teresa can add. I think we're trying to learn lessons that we've learned over the last couple of months about how we have to behave in food plants. We've also built some security measures through our compliance approaches and on regulations so that we have procedures available now should there be shortages, if there is an uptick in the number of cases in the fall. So we've really tried to learn the lessons from the last couple of months.
Thank you.
And I would add, we continue to refine our business continuity plans. So what we have defined what our critical services are, and we are prepared to focus on delivering those critical services in the event of a resurgence of cases.
Ms. Giuliano, do you speak French at all? Can you, if you do, can you respond in French as well? The translators can't hear you.
Nous avons déterminé les.
We have defined our essential services, and we are ready and the interpreter apologizes, but the volume isn't sufficient to give a fair rendition of what the witness has stated.
Thank you, Ms. Sadu. And we go now to Monsieur Thériault. I'm sorry, Monsieur Desilets. Monsieur Desilets, allez-y.
Mr. Desilets, you have the floor for 6 minutes. Thank you, Chair, and thank you to our witnesses, and congratulations for the people who are endeavoring to provide a reliable interpretation and translation service. Thank you. The interpreters in turn thank the MP. Regarding the outbreaks in the agricultural sector are numerous, and this we can read in the newspapers, in particular in Ontario, where there have been many outbreaks. So where do you think the weak points are which enable those outbreaks to occur? Thank you, Chair. I believe that my colleague, Mr. Yogurtis, is better qualified to answer your question. Thank you for the question. This is a complex issue, definitely, and this is not also our specialty within the agricultural department. We do work in close cooperation with our colleagues in the other federal departments and our counterparts in the provinces for the purpose of finding solutions. And one of the main elements is the 14-day quarantine, which has been announced by the government, together with $50 million in order to have agricultural producers to weather the costs of self-isolation and quarantine. But of course, yes, more difficulties have been experienced on the farms in the various regions. So we do work and cooperate with other departments and our partners for the purpose of finding solutions. Yeah, but who is in charge and who is responsible for it, for what happened? Well, I believe that is a shared responsibility between the various sectors of government and also producers. So that would depend on which aspect of the problems we need to discuss. And we do have a responsibility in terms of health and particularly in areas which are governed by regional or provincial health authorities. But as in our capacity as federal government, we do keep close contacts with them in order to find solutions. Yes. Another question, Mr. Yogurt, is Mexico seems to have requested some guarantees. Can you hear me properly? Yes. So it seems that Mexico has asked for guarantees and safeguards before providing us with the workers. What are the criteria for such guarantees? Yes, we are working in order to ascertain with our Mexican counterparts what are the elements which would provide for the necessary criteria to be satisfied and complied with. And so other departments do contribute to such conversations, and we are consulting with them. We're currently consulting them. And I'm convinced that the Mexican government wants to have more assurances in terms of protecting the health of the temporary workers coming to Canada from Mexico. And this is definitely a huge priority for us. Thank you.
So, is there... in fact, are there still workers coming in from Mexico to Canada and Quebec? Well, I do not have specific information, but we know that Mexicans' priorities are, of course, first to look at the farms where people have tested positive for COVID. So it's been put on hold currently. And the Mexican government really does want to allow people to come to Canada and work on this. We need to find a solution. Ms. Barnes, could you tell me about food stocks for next fall? And if there's going to be shortages, in which sector do you think there will be shortages in the fall? Chair, I think this is perhaps a question that I can answer. It's Mr. Seppi here. Thank you for that question. We're working closely with producers to follow how things have evolved over the last few weeks in terms of seeding. There are very specific types of production in certain regions that have not been able to seed as much, for example, with asparagus in Quebec and Ontario. And also with mushrooms, there's been a significant drop in production, in particular in Ontario. But it is difficult to predict what the situation is going to be in the fall. But as Mr. Gertis has said, that is why we're maintaining our efforts to ensure that we can bring in as many foreign workers as possible and also use other recruitment programs such as the YES program to ensure that the horticultural farmers have the help that they need when it comes to harvest in the fall. And just to add to what my colleague has just said on the Mexican situation, it's important to bear in mind that the Mexican government intervenes when it comes to the requests, but our embassy in Mexico is trying to deal with the applications for visas as quickly as possible for temporary foreign workers who wish to come to Canada. Thank you very much, Mr. Sippy. I think that my time is now up, so thank you. Thank you, Mr. Desilets. And now we'll turn to Mr. Davies, please. You have 6 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. My first question is to Ms. Barnes. Ms. Barnes, I don't know if you had the opportunity to listen to the testimony of Fabian Murphy, the National President of the Agriculture Union, who just testified to the committee. He, of course, represents all of the food inspectors and employees of the Food Inspection Agency. And the picture he painted of the CFIA's response to protecting its workers was rather startling. He, if I can summarize his evidence, he thought the CFIA was late to protect its workers. In fact, there's personal protective equipment that just arrived in Alberta last week. He spoke of employees having to share face shields, there being a shortage of latex gloves, N95 masks and shields, no consistent national approach across the country, that the specter of inspectors having to be assigned to multiple facilities, potentially being vectors of transmission of COVID-19, and in fact being banned by CFIA from using their own cloth masks, at least at the beginning. What's your response to that testimony?
Let me question.
Very loudly, please.
Thank you. I'll start by saying that the health and safety of our staff is a top priority for us at CFIA. All of the actions that we have taken to mitigate risks have been done in consultation with our occupational health and safety experts, our unions, local public health authorities, Public Health Agency of Canada, Health Canada, etc. We acted immediately to provide protective measures for our staff. As I mentioned in my earlier remarks, we began procuring masks and face shields for employees in establishments where social distancing could not be respected as soon as the public health advice in this matter evolved. And we were providing masks to our staff in late March, and we began procuring and distributing shields in mid-April.
Okay.
Thank you. Just one moment, Mr. Davies. I'm sorry, the translation didn't happen. Is that an answer you'd be able to give in French as well?
Yes, I can.
I will make adjustments to your time, Mr. Davies.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
La sécurité et la santé de nos employés, c'est une priorité pour l'agence.
I'm afraid the interpreter cannot interpret. The sound is not clear.
Do you want me to continue or shall I turn it over
Mr. Chair, this is Mr. Frédéric Sepe. I am pleased to translate what Teresa just said, if you allow me.
Yes, please. Thank you.
Okay. Merci beaucoup. Alors, comme disait...
Thank you. As Ms. Juliana was saying, the health and safety of the workers and agencies is a priority. Measures were taken as quickly as possible in consultation with the Health and Safety Committee and with the union reps. So we have tried to act immediately when we received the notices from the local public health agencies. For example, we started to hand out PPE and we set up separators for the employees at the end of March or from mid-April for other employees.
Resume your time, Mr. Davies. You have 2.5 minutes left.
2.5? That can't be, Mr. Chair. That's my that can't be the case. That's 2/3 of my time. Mr. Chair, I would please ask, I directed my question to Ms. Barnes for a reason, and that's because I wanted to avoid the translation problems. So perhaps you could direct the witness that I'm asking to answer the question. It completely unsettles the line of questioning when I have to listen to the same answer repeated twice. Ms. Barnes, I'm going to ask you, how many food processing facilities across Canada have experienced outbreaks of COVID-19 to date?
We'll have to get back to you with that specific number. I just know anecdotally there have been a few, but the exact number I don't know.
Okay. Now, to the Department of Agriculture and Agri-Food, I understand that the government of Mexico has put a moratorium on all workers coming to Canada. Can you provide the committee with a clear explanation of why those 2 Mexican migrant workers died of COVID-19?
Thank you for the question. Unfortunately, I'm not in a position to be able to provide details as to those specific cases, as they don't fall under the sort of purview of our department.
Fair enough. Do you know how many temporary foreign workers in Canada have contracted COVID-19 to date?
I don't have those numbers either. I think we have been having conversations, particularly with the provinces, to try to gather that information. But even at the provincial level, there's been some difficulties to pull the information together because it comes from the local health units as well. So it hasn't been as precise. But I do think that that type of question would need to be directed more precisely to FAC or Health Canada.
Could I ask you to undertake to provide the committee with those numbers?
We could look to get those information to the committee. And again, I just would say with the caveat that it'll depend on the kind of information we can get from the municipal to the provincial level, but we've started those conversations already to try to get a handle on those numbers. So
could you tell us then, thank you for that, could you tell us how many farm operations have been impacted by COVID-19 across Canada to date?
I don't have that information, but that is something that we can look to get back to you as well. It would be related to the same type of information gathering.
Now, on your webpage under compliance inspections, it says all Service Canada employer inspections during COVID-19 pandemic will be conducted virtually/remotely. Given the Migrant Workers Alliance has documented over 1,000 complaints of abuse from migrant workers, do you believe that virtual inspections are sufficient at this time?
So thank you again for the question. Again, not into the purview of our department, but I do know that this is one of the areas that is currently being looked at because of the situation as it's unfolding. I will say as well that from what I understand in terms of the virtual inspections, they are by video, in which inspectors are asking for the employers to go to various areas of the farm to provide that documented evidence. But in terms of the specifics of that, again, it would be outside of our purview.
Thank you. Back to CFIA. Would you be prepared to work with the union on their national plan? They outlined 5 points that they would like to see moving forward, particularly if there's an outbreak of COVID-19 in the fall. It includes a national approach, slowing down line speeds, routine testing, inspectors at one facility, and appropriate and sufficient PPEs. Is that a plan that you would commit to work with the National Agricultural Union on?
We've been working ongoing with the union, and so obviously we would continue those conversations. Some of what is in the plan is not within our purview. It's more for industry to take up, but in terms of our commitment to our employees to make sure they have PPE, we are making efforts to try to minimize the extent to which inspectors have to go from one establishment to the other. We've committed to that. So certainly there are elements of that plan that we are working on today with the union.
Thank you, Mr. Davies.
Thank you,
You
Mr.
are
Chair.
correct, by the way, when pointing out my error and saying you had 2.5 minutes left. You actually had 3.5 minutes left. So I did make allowances for the translation issues, and we will continue to do that as best we can as we go forward.
Thank you,
We
Mr.
go
Chair.
now to Mr. Weber. We're starting our second round with Mr. Weber. 5 minutes, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. My questions through you, of course, will be directed to the CFIA. In your testimony, you shared with the committee here today You had mentioned that you had hired new inspectors, 144 in fact, and 44 veterinarians, and you've welcomed back some recently retired individuals. You've reassigned staff, and you've also funded more overtime. I guess my question, where I then assume that you probably do not have a concern with the lack of inspectors that are out there. However, have there been challenges in meeting minimum staffing levels? Has there been absenteeism problems with food inspectors? Should we be concerned that a lack of inspectors could further disrupt the meat supply chain?
Thank you for the question, Mr. Chair, and I'll start if Teresa wants to jump in. But we've really, with the investment that we received, we've been able to service all of the shifts that the sector has asked for by virtue of that investment. Our employees have been incredibly dedicated. So former meat inspectors who are now working in another area of the agency are now putting up their hands to say, listen, I'll come back to help out. So with the dedication of our staff, we have not had issues yet to keep the plants running, and we anticipate that will continue. And with the investment, we've got that extra surge capacity to make sure we can continue to be there when we need to be there.
Great, that's good news. You also mentioned that you're working with some provincial counterparts to train and to equip provincial inspectors to provide this CFIA with inspection support on a temporary basis as needed. What types of training is unique to the federal inspectors that you have to give them, the provincial counterparts, additional training? What specifically?
Well, one example, Mr. Chair, would be that the law would be different. So the actual provisions that would be applied if there was a non-compliance observed, the inspector would have to be able to move between their former regime and the current one. So that's one example.
Okay. All right, thank you. And you also, in your testimony, you talked about that to ease the burden on industry and to support the food supply for Canadians, CFIA has introduced temporary compliance flexibilities. The changes include suspending some CFIA compliance activities and delaying compliance activities. Can you elaborate more on this and give us some areas of suspensions and delaying of compliances?
Yeah, so thank you for the question, Mr. Chair. So early on in the pandemic, the agency moved to its business continuity plan. And so we determined where we absolutely had to be there to provide critical service to keep the supply chain running. Luckily, we live in Canada where we have incredible level of food safety and high levels of compliance among just about the whole entire food system. So we were able to dial back, if you want to say, or to postpone some of our oversight in areas of the grocery store where risks are really pretty low, for example, in cookies or manufactured foods of that sort. So we've delayed inspections that we would have done while the COVID was running. And now that we're starting to normalize, we're going to start back up those inspections.
Thank you for that. Being from Alberta, I do actually have some fishing questions for you too at the CFIA with respect to the fishing season that has come upon us here. What plans does the CFIA have to ensure that we have proper food inspections in place there? I understand that physical distancing and sanitation on board boats is a unique challenge. So how is the CFIA going to deal with that?
Thank you for the question, Mr. Chair. So we'll approach it the same way we've approached the facilities producing the meat. So to the extent possible, inspectors will keep that 2-meter distance, but you're right, in some cases that's not possible. So Teresa's group will be making sure they have the adequate personal protective equipment that is going to be needed. We'll also be looking at if there are other ways to do that inspection, maybe look at records, try to be innovative in terms of how we do the inspections. But again, making sure that the food supply continues to operate.
Great. And also just recently, there are some media reports out there that say that most recent COVID outbreak in Beijing right now may be related to fish preparation boards. So do you have any information on this at all? Have you heard anything about this issue, and could you share that? If so, should Canadians be concerned about the transmission of a virus through any part of the food supply and the preparation process?
Yeah, thank you for the question, Mr. Chair. This is something we are aware of. It came up, I think, yesterday and last evening. We have been officially notified by China that they've asked us to be making sure that there's no chance of COVID-19 coming to them in products they import from Canada. The evidence is very clear on this globally, that there's been no cases of transmission of COVID-19 linked to food the food supply or even the packaging of food. So globally, regulators are very clear that it's not a pathway for the transmission of this disease. And we are communicating with China as is all regulators, because it wasn't just a Canadian issue, I think, that we stand behind the strength of our food supply.
Thank you, Mr. Weber.
Thank you.
We go now to Mr. Van Bynen. Mr. Van Bynen, go ahead. 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you to all the witnesses that have taken the time to be here and to provide us with their information. Overall, there have been 13 disease clusters and approximately 3,000 cases associated with meat and poultry plants alone. Agriculture is an area of shared jurisdiction between the federal government and the provinces and the territories. So what factors have contributed to the outbreak of COVID-19 in food production facilities in Canada, and what impact have these outbreaks had on the security of the food supply in Canada? And I'd like to direct that over to Agriculture and Agri-Food Canada.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I can perhaps start, and perhaps Mr. Jurgurtis would like to add. You're absolutely right that there's been, early in the COVID-19 pandemic, a number of highly visible cases that happened. We have in mind the case in Quebec of Olimel, and that has a major impact on the production and the slaughter of hogs. Now, there's very few in the meat sector. There's still a number of small-scale operations in certain parts of the country that have cases are not functioning at the full capacity. However, in terms of hogs and beef, the slaughter process now is almost at full capacity. Of course, while certain operations were closed, there's been a backlog of animals in the supply. But there's catching up that is being made thanks to companies adding overtime, additional shift. They're able to catch up on that backlog, but it will take several months before we catch up. But at no point we felt that the situation was such that it would create a food security or issue. It was more a question of maintaining the pipeline operation ongoing.
Okay. Thank you. Then what are the roles and the responsibilities of the federal, the provincial, and municipal governments in responding to the COVID-19 outbreaks in the food production facilities?
And again, perhaps I can start and colleagues can add. When there's an outbreak, the first responded is, as my colleagues from CFI indicated, would be the local health authorities. Now, it varies from one jurisdiction to another as to how decentralized it is. For example, if I would refer to the case of Olimel in Yamachiche, an outbreak that happened in late March, it was the Santé Publique, the health authority at the provincial level that intervened very quickly. But very quickly, CFIA, AAFC, as well as the health authorities in Quebec, the company, and the agriculture department in Quebec sat down together to look at all the dimension of the issue and how to remedy the situation. But it was Olimel, it was a company decision to close, and then they reopened after 2 weeks after taking all the measures to the satisfaction of the provincial health authority that it was safe to reopen.
Okay, so what steps has Agriculture and Agri-Food Canada taken to collaborate with different levels of government and industry stakeholders to respond to outbreaks of these facilities? Are there any specific steps that have been taken as a result of this pandemic?
Yes, there was a number of steps. while there's the jurisdiction is shared, as you pointed out, we are a convener. We are the main interlocutor to the industry when it comes, or their point of initial contact when it comes to issues of preoccupation for the industry. So one example is that we have worked with Public Health Agency of Canada and with the Canadian Centre for Occupational Health and Safety to compile all the guidance that exists at the federal level on public health, so that in one document there was at least, it was not the legal authority, but it was providing operators with a greater sense of what are the guidance that they should refer to in addressing their issues. Several provincial governments are doing the same thing, and we are coordinating our efforts through our mechanisms at agriculture of federal provincial collaboration.
So what was the most significant lesson learned and from the response of the data that you've received so far? What would you do differently going forward?
I think that like communication early on and being as transparent as we can be among partners are among the lessons. I think that there's a number of lessons that were learned of the how Alimel, for example. I'm using that case because it was quite symbolic at the beginning of the pandemic, and I think that there's the way that company operated was in transparent and collaborative with regulatory authority is a case study for what should be done. And in fact, since that initial outbreak, there has been no outbreaks in the hog processing plant of Alimel in Quebec.
Thank you. How much time do I have, Mr. Chair?
You're done. Thank you, Mr. Van Bynen.
Thank you.
We go now to Ms. Jansen. Ms. Jansen, please go ahead. 5 minutes.
Yes, thank you. I'd like to direct my questions, to Ms. Barnes, just especially because of her ability to speak with the proper microphone there. I just wanted to say it was been my unlucky pleasure of having to deal with the CFIA back in the day when I was farming. And so it's interesting to be able to have this opportunity to ask some questions. It was mentioned in the presentation that you took immediate and decisive action to protect the integrity of Canada's food supply. And I wonder if you can tell me why I'm hearing very different stories from poultry processors here in BC. When a few of our processors had to shut down to COVID-19 outbreaks, the other processing plants stepped in to fill the gaps by doing a lot of overtime. But their CFIA inspectors were unwilling to help out. They were demanding 2 weeks notice for overtime work, which of course is not feasible in a pandemic. So why were they refusing to do overtime in the beginning?
I think in the beginning, we were all learning what the new environment was like. And very quickly, we did put in place an escalation protocol so that if plants had an issue, they worked it up through the chain of command. If there was an extra shift they wanted to put on, there was a protocol and how to let us know so we could arrange our staff to provide that oversight. We also worked with the associations. So working at that level too, at the most senior level at the agency, we worked together to work through these issues. And after we set up these protocols, there were no shifts we weren't able to cover.
So I don't know if you had heard, but plants were basically telling their inspectors that in order to deal with the enormity of the situation, they had to proceed with humane killing, with or without inspectors on site. So when did CFIA finally encourage overtime for inspectors? Like, when did that happen?
I'm not sure I know exactly. As soon as those protocols were in place, we were doing extra shifts, I think, Teresa.
Okay, now
if I could add, we provide overtime services on a daily basis for industry, overtime in terms of daily shifts and overtime on weekends. So
unfortunately, under the pandemic, it seems that some of our meat processors were not getting that kind of service because the inspectors were unwilling without 2 weeks notice. But I wonder if I could ask another question. You mentioned that you have hired 144 new inspectors, 44 veterinarians, and seeing as the Canadian poultry processing is now down by an average of 7.5%, I imagine that and I understand it goes across the sector, due to the drop in food demands by restaurants and tourism. Why do you need more inspectors now compared to when Canada was in full swing? I mean, you mentioned it yourself, there's many inspections that weren't happening. Why the extra inspectors all of a sudden?
So, agriculture may want to comment on this as well, Mr. Chair, but I think what we saw and what we're seeing now is as plants that had challenges have sorted out their new way of operating, given equipment to their employees, they are now ramping up, and we are seeing a quick return to former levels of capacity and output out of plants. So we are investing to make sure if there is an uptick in cases in the future, and as agriculture mentioned, there's a bit of backlog in terms of some animals that have to be cleared. We're going to need that extra capacity to help the industry do it.
So quick question then. On April 15th or 14th or 11th, CFIA got $20 million so that they could ramp up and get prepared for this pandemic with enough, I guess, inspectors and so on. It took till June the 15th for $50 million to be put out by the government for food surplus program. When you think about it, the food surplus program at 50 million, when you know that at the, just in extra pounds of potatoes alone, it's 450 million pounds. Why did the CFIA get 20 million right away in the beginning, and now we only see like a measly 50 million for food surplus? Who got the priority here? What does it look like? Does it look like CFIA or farmers? And that's to Ms. Barnes. Perhaps she can answer it, or Ag Canada. It's fine with me.
I think it's agriculture.
So I'll thank you for the question, and I will attempt an answer and see if my colleague, Mr. Seppi, wants to add anything. I don't think I'd be in a position to make a comparison between the two different streams of funding for different types of initiatives or programs, and how government may have decided which has as a higher or more important priority.
Right.
But what I can say is that they're to serve different outcomes and objectives.
Yeah, no, exactly. And I think that my point today has just been that
Jensen,
farmers
your
are
time
not
is
getting the priority.
Thank you, Ms. Jensen. We go now to Dr. Jaksic. Dr. Jaksic, please go ahead.
Thank you very much, Chair. And my first question will be for Ms. Barnes of the CFIA. As Mr. Davies has said, you're aware that the Agriculture Union appeared earlier during this committee meeting, and Mr. Murphy made a clear request for some national standards. You have also alluded to the fact that in terms of your employees and issues like personal protective equipment and so on, you were very reliant on individual public health units. And I suppose this explains some of the lack of consistency in terms of some of the advice that was being given within each of the, we'll say the meat packing plants or the processing plants. Would you not find it preferable to have clearer national standards in terms of public health practice? Just so you know, during this committee over the last many months, there has been a call for clearer national public health standards. So could you speak to that a little bit? Because certainly from the union perspective, this lack of consistency certainly resulted in different outcomes in the plants themselves. And I'm sure, given your concern for your employees, that you would also be somewhat in favor of something clearer across the country.
Thank you for the question, Mr. Chair. We have heard those calls for a national approach. As we worked through these issues over the past 3 months, what we've learned is it can't be a national approach. The reason is in each community, those plants were either a hot spot within a broader community that was a hot spot, or it was very localized. And the response that happened in each plant really depended on the extent of the healthcare resources that were available in each community. Sometimes there didn't have to be as stringent a response if there was greater capacity to deal with the issue. So for us, it really became working with the local public health authorities in each instance to make sure we were responding and making sure our own employees were protected in that environment.
What sort of infection control procedures do you have as a minimum in all of the establishments that CFIA inspects. Obviously, there's a risk to employees, to your inspectors, in terms of those infections such as E. coli, where there is a risk to the individuals handling the meat. So what is your normal practice in terms of infection control on behalf of your employees?
Well, I think thank you for the question, Mr. Chair. I think as you mentioned, there are hazards in a meat plant. And so we would generally have proper hygiene that our inspectors would respect, generally speaking. With COVID, we've added that they do a check before they go into the plant, and then they make sure that they're feeling well after a shift. They inform their manager how they're feeling. So those are added steps we've taken. And then the addition of PPE. So as we've had these issues where we cannot keep the 2-meter distance, as Teresa mentioned, we've provided our staff with masks and face shields.
Well, I was getting to the normal practice, not in a COVID-19 situation, but what sort of personal protective equipment do you provide to your inspectors on a regular basis?
I don't know if Teresa can respond to that, or if we can get back to the committee if the translation issue is a problem.
It depends, Mr. Chair. The type of equipment that we provide staff is very much tied to the requirements of the job. And so in a normally in a meat processing plant, they're provided with appropriate equipment such as coats and boots and hard hats where they're required. And if a hazard assessment would be done in other situations that might be more dangerous, like working in a barn where there is an animal disease situation, and if risks were identified, the appropriate equipment would be provided to staff.
Miss Juliana, is it possible for you to try that in French as well? I will pause, Dr. Jaczek, I'll pause your time.
Dans les circonstances normales.
Normally, under normal circumstances, we have equipments which are provided to our inspectors.
Giuliani goes on to the French when she speaks French so that we don't get the English French, and she doesn't either. If she switches to toggles to the French.
Yes, please try that, Miss Juliano. That might help.
L'équipement qui est nécessaire.
The equipment which is provided to our staff is determined by an assessment we carry out of the risk. The interpreter is speaking on the English channel. One has to make sure that Ms. Giuliani is using the French channel when she does speak French. Thank you, sir.
"15 seconds.
I'm wondering if the CFIA has ever been involved in any sort of pandemic planning, given that obviously so many people are working in very close proximity to each other. So prior to COVID-19, had there ever been any exercise related to the possibility of a pandemic?
Thank you for the question, Mr. Chair. We can get back with specifics. I'm sure we have, because we are responsible for the animal health area as well. So we've definitely exercised around major animal health diseases. And I do believe in some of the human health pandemics we have been involved, but we'll have to get back to the committee with specifics.
Thank you, Dr. Jaczek. We go now to en français. Nous allons...
In French, we're going to move to Mr. Thériault, if you please, for 2 minutes. Thank you very much, Chair. temporary foreign workers are essential for our producers. And Mr. CP, you mentioned a moment ago some sectors which really run into huge difficulties: asparagus, mushrooms, and some producers where I am who were, of course, already struggling, but whose situation has been compounded by the pandemic, and they didn't have the advanced signals which might have helped them. Because you mentioned that producers are feeding us, but then they had real problems, and those problems had to be solved. So we needed to have solutions, and there were the $1,500 as a lump sum, but that wasn't sufficient, and the quarantine should have been paid for by the state. Do you agree with this? I suppose you do. And what additional provisions should we take before a second wave, so that we will the advance warning to our producers, so that we will not have a problem of shortages?
Merci, Monsieur le Président. Alors peut-être je vais débuter.
Thank you, Chair. Mr. Thériault has dealt with a number of issues, and yes, people who grow vegetables have had difficulties. They've been struggling, and we've been in touch with them throughout the crisis, and they needed to have more temporary workers, foreign temporary workers, as possible, as quickly as possible now. And this is where they needed help. And regarding the quarantine program, this is now something that has to be dealt with by employers themselves, but they have been given. Well, do you have recommendations? Which recommendations would you make for the purpose of really helping producers so that they would feel reassured and be supported by programs which really encourage them to produce sufficiently, and they won't have to throw away half of their production? Yes, yes, of course, and that helps the decision of what kind of produce they'll be sowing. Now, regarding the quarantine program, this is a decision to be made by health authorities, and then the $1,500 are available with a ceiling of 50 million, and we wanted to make sure that we would have some. They had to justify the use they were made of the money, but in order to determine whether or not they were entitled to it. Thank you, Mr. Thériault.
Mr. Davies, you have, go ahead, 2.5 minutes.
Oh, thank you, Mr. Chair. To the Department of Agriculture, we know that in April, the federal government announced the $50 million program to help farmers and fish processors who are bringing in temporary foreign workers during the COVID-19 crisis. So we know that under that program, employers are eligible for up to $1,500 per foreign worker to help cover the costs of complying with the mandatory 2-week quarantine upon their arrival in Canada. We know the employers must provide the accommodation for those employees during that self-isolation period and pay those workers during the 14-day period. According to a spokesperson from the Department of Agriculture and Agri-Food, if an employer is found not to be compliant with those requirements under the Quarantine Act or the TFW program, they would no longer be eligible for the $1,500. Could you inform the committee of how many inspections have been conducted to ensure employers are compliant with the requirements under the Quarantine Act or the TFW program to date?
Hi, thank you for the question. I wouldn't have specific information in terms of how many have been done. Part of the processes do involve, as I'd spoken a little earlier, about some of the other jurisdiction from local health units, as well as other requirements that are in place. So that type of information isn't something that I readily have at hand.
Well,
but
can I
as
ask you,
this,
sir, could I interrupt you and just ask you, how will you enforce the federal requirements if you're not taking responsibility as the federal government for enforcing the very criteria that the government is implemented? Surely it's not the provincial government's responsibility to double check your requirements, is it?
No, correct. And sorry if I misled. What I'm trying to indicate is that it's part of a process that we're working on, primarily led by FAC, and so they have been doing a number of inspections. The indications that we do have so far in terms of what has been done is fairly minor difficulties that have been corrected. So to my understanding, as it stands right now, in terms of at that level of the inspections that are done for the compliance as it pertains to the 14-day quarantine period, we have not seen any, but I'll have to get more specific information and get back to the committee as that unfolds.
Thank you, I appreciate that. And to CFIA, according to a June 12th article from Food in Canada, CFIA has announced that it is now in a position to gradually resume some inspection services that were temporarily suspended because of the COVID-19 pandemic. Could you tell the committee specifically what inspection services were temporarily suspended, and in your view, what impact the suspension of those inspections had on food safety in Canada, if any?
Thank you for the question, Mr. Chair. So as we mentioned in our remarks earlier, when COVID hit, we went to our business continuity plan. So we prioritized food safety investigations, exports and import investigations, all the lab work that would have supported that, any animal health issues that needed to be prioritized, we focused on. And that allowed us then that bandwidth to make sure that we were making sure the food supply system kept moving. We were clear that where compliance has traditionally been very high, we knew we could delay going in for inspections for a month or so. It wasn't going to compromise food safety for Canadians. So those are the kinds of things.
But the question was, what services were you not doing? I understand what you were doing. My question was, which inspection services did you suspend?
So there were something like our inspections of a manufacturer of cookies or cereals, something like that would have been something we would have delayed. And we are now restarting.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Davies. I'd like to, so that brings our round two to a close. That takes us to the end of our meeting. I'd like to thank our witnesses for sharing with us your time and your expertise. For putting up with our technical issues. And I would also like to thank the translators for their trials and tribulations.
Interpreters in turn thank the chairman.
And I would like to thank the members, of course, for once again having a great meeting. And with that, we are now adjourned. Thank you.
Thank you.